Bob, does 4 of us constitute quorum?
I think Ed will join momentarily.
Well, now Erica definitely has to have her screen on. Oh, all right. Oh, there's Ed. You're on mute, so if you're saying something witty, we can't hear it.
So that's my work background.
Oh, nice.
This is my work background also, not to show Ed up or anything.
Oh. Usually I have some like beach scene and I got told at work, I was like, hey, it's not very work-like.
Where are you, Ed?
I'm in Florida.
All right.
Yeah.
Erica?
How were the storms, Ed?
You mean yesterday?
Yeah. Was it yesterday? No, it was
Sunday.
Saturday night, Sunday.
Sunday night. Yeah, actually we got a lot of like 2.5 inches of rain at Tampa Airport.
Oh my God.
So I'm at St. Pete Beach and I'm in a high rise and I'm on the corner. So man, it got really windy really fast. Had to bring all my furniture in because it was blowing pretty quick, pretty hard. I was like, wow, interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
Everybody
our
used-
neighbors, their flight got canceled. They were coming back from Florida and it took them 15 hours to drive back from like middle of Florida area, beach area. What I think Amelia Island maybe kind of area. But yeah, 15 hours to get home.
All right, we ready to begin? Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Dunwoody Planning Commission for April 13, 2021. Tonight we have an exciting meeting because we'll be talking about signs. So with that, we'll do roll call. I'll begin. I'm Bob Dallas.
Thomas O'Brien.
Rob Price.
Erica Harris.
Ed Wagner.
All right, and from our staff, we have Paul and Richard. All right, welcome. And is that everybody? I think so. All right, the next item is the approval of the March 9th, 2021 minutes. So
Motion to approve the minutes.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, so Erica moved and Thomas seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All right, opposed, like sign. All right, thank you very much. All right, do we have any organizational procedural items that we're aware of? I think the answer is no. Do we have any unfinished business other than our business is never done? But we do have new business, and tonight we're going to review a new sign ordinance to replace Chapter 20 of signs. And always reminded of the song, but signs are important, especially in Dunwoody, and we look at the creation of the city. And things, for example, the DHA has done in years past to try to ensure that we have appropriate signs that serve us well. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff to do the introduction, and then we'll have comments, 10 minutes in favor, 10 minutes opposed. And then the idea is for the planning commissioners, I guess, to go through section by section. And if I accept Paul's offer to take notes on the comments that would be captured as we go through the sections, then presumably at the next meeting, we would incorporate some suggestions from your perspective, and then we would be more definitive as to a vote on specifics. Is that suit everybody? Okay, and okay. All right, so with that, our director, it's all yours.
All right.
Oh, you can take your mask off to speak.
I can. So
Great.
good evening. Thank you for introducing the sign ordinance. Let me go back a little bit and talk about how we got here, because we were, my former staff and I were taking some changes to the sign code, which was probably the fourth time since I've been here that we've done changes to it. And council finally said, enough's enough. Let's go back and start over and do it for real. So I said, very good. So introduced Sean Sutter from ZoneCo. He was the winning bidder. He also is partnered with Caleb Russicott, who is a planner who you all remember who did the village code. He was doing the visual graphics on this, but Sean and his team wrote it. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sean.
Great. Thank you, Richard, and thanks everyone for having me here tonight. We're very proud to go through this, pleased to be able to present this to you. It's been many months in progress. It's not perfect, I'm sure, and but it's getting hopefully closer to something that will work for the city. I preface any kind of sign discussion as there really are no right or wrong answers, but it's what works for you and your community. And so that's what we tried to strike that balance by talking with staff and the stakeholder committee that we met with 3 times and had lengthy work sessions with a great cross section of your community, including the mayor and the manager of the large mall, Premier Mall, as well as a number of other folks from the community. It was a great group. And so what we're presenting you here today is the culmination of a lot of working sessions, feedback from the stakeholders, discussions with staff, multiple reviews. And like I said, we're very much looking forward to hearing from you and getting your feedback and input so that we can go back, take that input and make another draft to present to you at a subsequent meeting. With me, as Richard said, is Caleb Rossico of TSW. He is obviously someone that's familiar to you, and we're pleased to be teamed up with him. His team helped peer review all of this based on their local knowledge, and also did all the graphics and helped us format, and just we're great partners, good editors and whatnot. So we're glad to be here. We started the process like we do all of the processes when we're redoing or rewriting a zoning code, is we take a look at your existing zoning code, your existing chapter 20, existing sign code, and we do a diagnostic just based on our professional experience writing sign codes, writing zoning codes around the country. And we take a look at it and we identify things that we think could be improved. And so there, among other things, there were a few takeaways from that diagnostic report. One is that the current sign code attempts a one-size-fits-all approach to signage that ties signage dimensions to gross building area, which is unusual, I would say, and not common practice in most places. So, and really, I don't think is getting you the results you're looking for anyway. And I think it's leading to some unintended consequences that the city has been experiencing. It's lacking some modern, more common sign terms and standards that really need to be employed for ease of use and consistency with surrounding communities, and other communities around, so that it's not a mystery every time someone comes in to Dunwoody about, okay, what do these terms mean? They're outdated. We're trying to modernize this, simplify it, and make it easier to use as much as possible. But see, signs change a lot because sign technology changes a lot, and retail changes a lot, and preferences change a lot. And so it's just really a good practice to take a fresh look at this every so many years. We'll have it up to date as of 2021, but we don't know what 2025 is going to be like with technology. Just think of LED signage, how that's changed signage. And so it's just a good idea to take a fresh look at this and modernize it from time to time to stay current. To be more context sensitive, We believe that the new sign code should be organized more simply using a menu of sign and illumination typologies with corresponding corresponding standards by district. That allows the sign code to be much more intentional about the outcomes it's trying to achieve. So if we tie it into the districts rather than just, like I said, a one-size-fits-all based on building area. A sign menu approach, we believe, should be used to allow businesses and property owners the flexibility to select the best mix of signage to most effectively achieve their needs. And so we've created this sign menu where we have standardized sign types, we have standards by zone and district, but it's somewhat of a mix and match. You know, choose two of these that work for your business. And I think, you know, that kind of approach gives people some flexibility, but also, you know, has parameters around it so that the citizens and the community and the city know what they're going to get. Okay. So those were our conclusions generally in the diagnostic. Those were supported by comments and feedback we got from the steering committee at its initial meeting back in September. Like I said, we've since met with them a couple more times. So I'll just run through a little bit of what has changed. And one of the things that we did was we took a fresh look at your signs that you've listed in your ordinance, your sign types. And we either consolidated some of them, renamed some of them to be more descriptive, eliminated some of them, that kind of thing. And we categorized them by permanent sign types and what we call limited duration or temporary signs. And there are different signs for different needs. You know, residential signage is obviously much different than commercial signage. Okay, so most of the residential signage, when it comes to a single family context, is going to be your limited duration yard type signage versus obviously permanent signage for commercial uses or multifamily uses. Of course, we cannot regulate by content. So what's out the window and what I think has been out the window since the Reed versus Gilbert case in the Supreme Court of the United States about 5 or 6 years ago is any reference to categorizing signs by their content. So what you won't see in this ordinance anymore is real estate signs, political signs, even the term standard information signs, I think probably goes too far. So, you know, we did have this reviewed by your city attorney who gave us great feedback and made sure that this draft is up to date with federal and state law. So that's good. You should be rest assured that that's you're not going to have any issues there. And I'm sure that the city attorney will review this again prior to adoption, just to make sure everything's in there. But so those kind of things, some change, you know, and one thing that we've seen around the country, especially with the recent election cycle, you know, signs are everywhere, yard signs are everywhere. We're getting calls from communities all over saying, how do we stop this kind of sign? Or this person wrapped their entire house in some candidate's flag, you know, what do we do? All that, you know, those are things that we're all grappling with. They're difficult. And First Amendment really, you know, allows for political speech. It's a very high standard of use. So again, you're not going to see as much as you might want to stop some of that stuff from happening. It's very hard to do. And so you're not going to see a whole lot about that. But we are talking about yard signs and what we can regulate, which is the location, the size, the materials, you know, the time, place, and manner. That's what you're allowed to regulate. Okay, and so you'll see that that's what our focus is. That's my point of saying that to you. With that, I think if you want me just to launch into the current draft, I can do that. I'll try to point out as we go what we changed or didn't change. We didn't change everything in your current chapter 20. But what we did, generally speaking, is reorganize it. Like I said, create sign types and then assign them standards by district. But we also rearranged things just to make it flow better and hopefully more easy to use. I think a big change and a big improvement to what you have currently are the graphics and the tables and the charts. So instead of just, almost completely being words, text, and paragraph after paragraph, we've incorporated quite a few graphics to try to explain these concepts, to try to give people a picture or an image. I mean, signs are very visual, right? That's the whole point of them. And so to have a sign code that's not visual doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So more and more we're seeing, and we're drafting sign codes that are very visual and that try to lay this out, because there's a lot of details, as succinctly and clearly as possible. You may look at it and say, boy, you missed the mark. But please just let us know, because we've been looking at this for months. You all are taking a fresh look at it. If you don't think it's clear and intuitive to use, we need to know that. You won't offend me, but there are a lot of details, certainly. So we'll work through that. You wanted to go ahead and just kind of start from the top?
Yeah, we can go section. We're suggesting a section by section, but just
Okay.
as a procedural question, should we take public comment now or wait to go through the whole process? I'm going to suggest going through the whole process, because would that be correct, Richard?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so we'll go through the whole process of section by section, and then we'll take public comment for the 10 for and the 10 against. And I dare say some, maybe both. So in looking at this, and Sean, I don't know if you want to, kind of guide the way. My thought would be that we would take sections, that you've put forward here. You describe briefly what it is, allow some conversation amongst the planning commissioners. And then from that, hopefully, Paul will be able to capture some ideas that we have in that conversation. So in a sense, allowing you to kind of guide things. Really, I mean, I hate to say going section by section because it's tedious, but if we don't, we'll miss something. Been my experience on dealing with this very ordinance in the past. So rather than my talking, you summarizing, allowing conversation, questions to be asked of you and Caleb and the staff as to what the thought is and how that might compare to what we do today. So is that okay with you?
That sounds like a good plan. Yes, that sounds great. So what I'll do is I'll go through each article, and then we can pause and do that if that works.
Yeah. And
okay.
So you have articles with lots of sections in them. So
yeah. So
it's kind of like Yellow Brick Road. You begin at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll start at the top. And on my screen, I don't have everything memorized, so I'm going to be looking at my screen. But from the top, your current code and like the proposed code, it has to start with an introduction, how to use the sign code. It's really important to set that up at the beginning of the code. So you'll see the purpose and intent is exactly the same as your current purpose and intent. I didn't change any of that. If the city wants to change any of that, certainly please do. That's your prerogative, and happy to make those changes. I didn't have any suggestions.
So if we take that basically section 20-1 and -2, you're saying that's copied from the current code, which is
that's
the
correct.
Legal justification in essence for why we're doing this.
That's right, and the applicability.
So
that's correct.
With that, from the planning commissioner's perspectives, do you have any questions or comments regarding what has been said here? Chime in if you do.
Yeah, I'll rest on 20-1 and -2.
So you're good?
Yes.
Okay. Folks on the Zoom call. Okay, so we're keeping the same foundation, as it were. Section 20-3 is how we measure things.
Correct.
And this is new to me.
Yeah, and it's new to your code. And it's really important, especially when you're dealing with anything that has dimensions, right? That guide the code. So much of what the sign ordinance is it's, here's the maximum area of the sign, or here's the location, the allowed location of the sign. So the question is where you measure from, where you measure to. Obviously, the ground isn't completely flat. You've got grade changes, things like that. So we try to standardize the measurement, and you'll see that in 20-3.1, which is all about height, because you really don't want people playing games with topography or building up mounds and then putting a sign on top to get extra height. You want to normalize that. And then secondly, the sign area measurement. So, how do we measure the sign area when we're talking about maximum sign dimensions?
This is somewhat consistent with how we measure the height of a house, for example, which has limitations. Are there any questions amongst the planning commissioners on this one?
Two questions. What is to prevent somebody from building up a berm under the A section, building up a berm and sticking a sign on top of it? How is that precluded by the language?
Yeah, it's a measurement from your natural grade. And so that has to be determined what that natural grade is. But if I build up a berm, that's not the natural grade.
Is natural grade a defined term in this? Or is that such a commonly accepted term among those that build that it would be unreasonable for them to interpret it otherwise?
Well, I will look. It is either in your code or we will define it. The natural grade, yeah, it's probably in your current zoning code. We'll look at that. It's a good question.
Okay.
The follow-up question I actually have to that too is, what if I build up a berm and then 10 years later put a sign up? Is the berm the new natural grade, or
Right.
was it what it was like before? So
Yeah, I think defining that, I mean, I like the purpose. The purpose of the A section makes perfect sense. I just, I think it would be great to close that just so we kind of try and prevent abuse. My secondary question on 20-3 is in the C section, where you're talking about two signs placed presumably back to back so that the faces can't be seen. You indicated that they couldn't be more than 24 inches apart. Is that, if they're at some sort of like a oblique angle, is that the 24 inches at the closest or at the furthest, or do you think we need a refinement? 24 inches apart at the closest or something along those lines? Yeah,
that's a good question too. Typically, those are going to be at an angle, but I think the idea is so that they're not sitting out like this, that they're actually back to back. Truly, they're appear to be one sign, so you try to make them as close as possible. But you could say not more than 24 inches apart at its furthest distance, if at an angle or something like that.
Okay, just my thoughts. And again, I'm certainly not the end all here. Those are my two thoughts on that section.
Right, those are good questions.
One thing I note in the table of contents that we have, maybe it's changed. It doesn't necessarily exactly match up with the document. For example, we see 20-3 as defined terms, but 20-3 in the document is how to measure sign dimensions. So is 20-3 defined terms not been provided, or is it being developed?
No, that's at 20 dash, is it 20-5 maybe? Is it?
No, you're right. We just
20-16.
We just didn't update the table of contents in the last draft.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm just saying in terms of, because defined terms is in, so they would have, is not 20-3, it's 20-16.
Yeah.
So these will be reconciled, I guess, in the future is what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. We just did not update the TOC for some reason.
Yeah, but I think that's a great recommendation on the natural grade. As as we know, at least with homes anyway, that's always been a fight to see how tall a house can be.
Yeah. That's why I'm pretty sure that's defined in your code, but I would just want to double check that. The definitions that you have currently in your code would apply to this. This chapter 20, if there are any additional definitions that are specific to 20, we've called them out in here under the defined terms. So I would just, I think it probably is, but I just would want to confirm that.
Can I just add to that, Bob, since you are bringing that up, and it's something that I think the city has found in loopholes in the past in terms of redevelopment when people have subdivided lots and using location for the natural for what the height of the house could be or what the setbacks could be. So I would just say, I know that with the using of the idea of the natural grade, maybe making sure there's no loopholes in there. So having something comparative to what would be maybe commercial plats on the left or right, helping guide that. I just would hate to see someone be able to find a loophole within natural grade. I think it was Robert who brought up 10 years later, what if they create a berm, or when they, build this, do they build up something just specifically for, this sign in particular, and it's the new natural grade. So just, I would eyes open for loopholes there.
I would note if you have a large development, for example, and the whole property gets graded, so it might be like this and it ends up like this, and it's all graded and the roads are put in. I guess in that scenario, the natural grade probably wouldn't be appropriate. And I don't know if that's a scenario that would come up. I mean, let's say Dunwoody Village is purchased in whole by somebody and they come up with a master plan, then you could expect, if it was all being torn down, to be regraded, however the developer wanted it to look at the end. A good example is the property over in National Dunwoody, right? That's being redeveloped where the racetrack is going in. Talk about moving some dirt there. What's its natural grade? There's nothing natural about that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and my point in bringing up the natural grade, or rather the loopholes, is just to make sure that it's complementary to surrounding businesses, right? So that you don't have something that maybe looks offset or strange comparative to a neighboring or to something that has a sign right next door, right? So there's some sort of ability to create cohesiveness in the larger scale of things rather than just individually.
So if I was to summarize this, I would suggest consider all the possible topographical circumstances and changes that a developer could make to that property, and ask the question, what does he really want? And have words that capture that.
Yeah, your zoning code has average grade, existing grade, and finished grade. This would be equivalent to existing grade, means the elevation of the ground surface before development. That's hard to determine. Average grade means the mean elevation of the ground along a line, determining by dividing the sum of the elevation to the highest point of the line, the elevation of the lowest point of the line by 2. That might be, maybe it's more average grade, and then finished grade is the final grade of the ground surface after development.
Yeah, the average grade, I think, was redefined because that was to help again with building heights, and you'll see the same, I think, used with setbacks in building.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a good place to start, is using average versus final, or some combination, between the two.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because natural is going to be tough to determine. Okay, good.
20-4 is a sign location.
Yeah, so this one's, sorry, I'm just going to go back to your Existing code 2. I've got 3 things up on my screen. I'm toggling back and forth, so bear with me a little bit here. Sign location is obviously all about visibility, making sure that the sign is not located in a place that's going to cause a blind spot or impair vision for somebody driving there. So we've created the vision triangle concept in here, which is essentially a triangle of open space so that a car pulling up or a pedestrian or a bicyclist isn't going to be blinded by a sign in that triangle.
Any thoughts or comments on that?
Just a
Robert?
point, oh, I'm sorry, Robert. Mine's more a point of procedure here or definition. I noticed in that section 3 under 20-5, you talk about the vision, or 20-4, I guess. You talk about the vision triangle. And then in 20-5, you talk about the visibility triangle. It appears that there are multiple terms of use, and neither one of those is, well, I'd like to see, and I understand you define it here. It may be, if it's a defined term, it may be worth throwing in the definitions as well, but certainly even if you don't do that, we may want to consider having a consistent nomenclature for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll change that. It's interchangeable. We'll call it a vision triangle because that's what we used up above. So I'll change that.
So mine, I guess, is just to clarify. So number 3 talks about the vision triangle, but really the more important is item 1, which is that you can't impair visibility. So do we want to have, I guess the order on this is okay, but for sure nothing is allowed in the vision triangle, but that vision triangle could be expanded if you have kind of a big weird sign that is tough for drivers to see around when they're trying to pull out or something.
Right, that's broader.
You can also have landscaping in it because that next section in 20-5 allows 30 inches of landscaping in the visibility triangle. The last sentence, and I kind of don't understand that either.
Yeah, so we're not saying you can't landscape these, but if you can, it would have to be low landscaping in that visibility triangle.
I guess, sorry, I'm interrupting, I apologize. I guess I'm thinking, maybe we just clarify for number 3, at a minimum, signs shall not be located within the vision triangle. Kind of specify that that's kind of the absolute lowest requirement, but these other requirements could, maybe it's an issue that will come up, but that to me seems like it's one of the most important components of this ordinance is that people can see around the signs.
It is.
Does this apply to MARTA bus stops? And I say that because there are a couple that are
Right in the triangle.
right here at Ashford, Dunwoody, and Valley View. Come this way.
I was going to ask also, just because we have some buildings that have really pushed those setback limits. And so this will help me for clarity. Let's look at the one that's the 15 feet with the curved street. What if the building side is right there and it's not a 90-degree angled building, but rather you've got a building that's cut to have exactly what you've drawn there, so they could not have a corner sign if they were within that setback? There couldn't be something on the building at any height, even though it would not impede visibility of pedestrians or cars or any of that. So regardless of the height.
You've got an example of that with the new urgent care center at Shamby, Dunwoody, and Mount Vernon.
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm thinking here. So it brings up a curious, again, I understand for the safety procedures, but aesthetically, if I had a building cornered like that, and maybe that was an entrance location for my place of business, putting a sign right there would be, think would be necessary.
I'm not sure that this would prohibit that if it's on the wall.
Okay,
Yeah, because that building butts up right to the right of way, so there is no private room. So it's either a wall sign or no sign there.
oh, perfect.
Yeah, what they couldn't do is what some people might want to do is put a perpendicular monument sign up against the building in that triangle. That's where you run into problems.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the,
And you know, we don't have to allow any landscaping in there if you don't want. That's just a suggestion, trying to say, hey, low ground cover or low type landscaping, it could be allowed there in the visibility triangle. If you don't want that, if you don't think, because people may not maintain it at exactly 30 inches or less, maybe it's just prohibited and these corners remain bare.
Yeah,
Grass.
I think I'd like to see nothing in the visibility triangle because of that maintenance issue. If it was up to me, but the landscaping is allowed there up to 30 inches. I think that's substantial. I'd like to see that stricken as far as landscaping in the triangle.
Yeah, if I may add, your zoning ordinance does already have a general intersection visibility requirement that's very similar to this. It does talk about landscaping, plant material, signage, et cetera, fencing, all that sort of thing.
Right, well, like my read of it is, there's signs can't be in the triangle whatsoever, but signs are required to be landscaped, and that landscaping can cover up to about 30 inches from the grade. Yeah, that's kind of where my head is on that.
Mhm.
Oh, and as we're coming up with defined terms here, I note that the picture has yet a third description as a vision clearance triangle. They're all good terms. I just think we ought to pick one.
Yep, agreed.
Richard, can I ask a question about landscaping? So the Dunwoody Village Apartments, I think, on North Peachtree, they have a cornered sign there. And I believe it's a cornered sign. And they have flower beds and whatnot in front of it. Would this, by taking out landscaping, would that prohibit someone like those apartment complexes from putting a flower bed in front of their sign?
Conceivably, yes.
So Tom, I hear your, I hear the concern there. Alternatively, I do think that there are places where landscaping can be a positive thing aesthetically, in particular when we're thinking about apartment complexes. So I would push back against the suggestion to stricken it if it would prohibit a business such as like an apartment complex from beautifying the area.
What would you think, Erica, about a height requirement that's significantly lower than 30 inches? I mean, if we're talking about like little ground creeping flowers, I don't think that presents nearly the issue that shrubs,
Yeah.
whatever. But
I think I would say in front of the sign, I think we could definitely keep it under 30 inches flanking the sign. I would be hesitant if you had some sort of small green shrubs to the left or the right. I think we could lower it. I wouldn't be opposed to anything under 24 inches. It needs to be something that is manageable for the city to enforce as well. So maybe examples in there of what is allowed, as guidance, right? We don't want you putting in evergreen or what with thujas, right? Nothing like that. But I would encourage us to consider by striking something fully, it may eliminate something that could be visually appealing.
So when the average driver is driving by, you're sitting several feet above 30 inches, at least 2 feet above that. And when walking, 30 inches is all about this. So nothing can grow taller than that. So those are very little shrubs. So.
okay. All right. Well, again, what I'm kind of viewing my role in this is just pointing things out that council may want to consider and discuss. And Erica raises good points about, to be a lot lovelier if we didn't prevent it entirely, and then that would be generally pleasing aesthetically, especially in the case of like the North Peachtree sign. I get that. I just want to balance safety with presentation, and I think as long as council addresses that or looks at that, point's taken, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, my question centers around landscaping in general. Why is that in the sign section? Is there not another section within the ordinance that should be someplace else?
I wonder if it's just because you mean taking landscaping out as signs, right? Like,
Correct. I mean, I would think this would be covered someplace else within the proper context of the descriptions of just the safety of that vision clearance triangle area, not within the signs section.
Yeah, it's just one more place where if they're only looking for signs and they want to landscape around it, they don't have to go looking throughout the entire code for the landscaping.
So the landscaping in a corner intersection isn't covered anyplace else within our ordinance.
Yeah, it is. So in chapter 16, I believe, in the roadway designs, it's covered there as well.
All right, so without going back and looking at that right now, I mean, I would make sure that they're in compliance with each other, they're in line with each other.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about some commercial context, but think about all the monuments to every neighborhood that have signs that have been put up, throughout the city. Don't forget in perimeter, some of the signs are kind of like in the median of the street that don't have a lot other than the sign, then this curb, and then the street. So whatever this says, it has to perhaps accommodate some of those different circumstances.
I would add that the signs right out there by City Hall are surrounded by landscaping.
Yeah, see, that's properly landscaped.
Yeah, I would say landscaping is appropriate, but I just, my commentary is it's in the sign section. Go to the landscaping section. But that's
Right.
as long as they're in alignment, I guess.
Yeah, we can just do a reference. If it is, covered elsewhere, I think this is just specific to ground mounted signage has to be landscaped. I'm not sure if that's covered elsewhere or not, but we'll look at that.
I would be, and not to belabor this point, I would be in favor of keeping the language here, just because, as Richard noted, we are trying to make this kind of a one-stop shop. And if we want to put a reference to other landscaping requirements in that section, that might be a good idea, but.
You incorporate them here.
But I think anything that's sign related ought to be textually here, so you can just print it off and have what you need to do. Right.
yeah, I hear that. I wonder if there's other places where we've said, for example, when we were talking about lighting or power, like what code would override what code, right? So creating boundaries. So it might be wise to put something like that in, this is allowed, but any, more strict, code found in section 16 will trump, yada, yada, yada.
Right. So ready to move on to the next section? Owner's consent.
That is unchanged from your current code, just carried forward.
Any comments on that, folks?
My comment here is when you talk about removal in 20-9, the cross references here to erect a sign, one requires the owner's consent or authorized agent, and that may be authorized agent as contemplated by a lease agreement. But then when we look over at 20-9 subsection 2, we talk about removal and the toll being expensed against the account of either the owner or the lessee. I think we ought to have those two sections say similar things in the sense that what we could have here is a situation where we end up putting an owner and a lessee at odds. For something the owner did, we might end up penalizing a lessee if we're talking about a non-maintained sign. I don't really like the conflict between the two, and I think we probably ought to maybe enumerate a lessee as somebody who has the ability to place a sign. And if they have a problem with the owner due to the not being contemplated by the lease agreement, then let them take it up under the contract that they have. But I think the two should probably tick and tie.
Yeah, looking at it here. So this is about permitting or posting signage on property. It has to be consent. So we would put property owner, lessee, or authorized. I don't know who the authorized agent would be necessarily. Maybe the sign company that they hire or something.
I mean,
But it could be a lessee.
authorized. For example, an apartment complex is
Management.
owned by somebody that's managed by another company. That's the
Yeah,
agent. of the owner.
That's a good point.
And then you have, tenants, of course. So
Yeah.
I think what you're looking at is whomever authorized it should be held responsible for that.
Right.
So what Tom's saying is, make them consistent that way.
The city may remove or cause to be removed the sign at the expense of the owner and/or, okay. All right, so it would be, we just need to say, add in lessee and then authorized agent in both of them, the owner, lessee, or authorized agent.
Well, I think that depends on what public policy we want to enforce through this. I mean, do we want, if we just limited it to owner, the owner could take it up with their registered agent or lessee,
Yeah,
their own action. Again, what I think is it should be consistent. I don't necessarily have an argument as to what it should be consistently saying, because I don't have any skin in seeing a lessee or registered agent or an owner have joint and several liability for it.
Mhm.
What I do want is for there to be, make it their problem, but also be consistent in who we told this against.
Yeah, I think it's more common that it would go against the owner, because that's who you're going to be able to find anyway, because that'll be in the public records. You may not know who the lessee is or the authorized agent, so the city might not. So I think we just go with owner there and let them figure it out. Be simple for the city. Good comment.
The next section,
Sign
sign maintenance.
Mhm.
Was that?
So this is just a requirement that signs have to be maintained in good, safe structural condition and compliance with all applicable codes and laws in this chapter at all times. And that includes replacing bulbs, parts, materials, painting, repainting, cleaning, and other acts. And if it does not, the city, I guess we could say, may require its removal, or shall, depends on how tough you want to be.
Good thing this doesn't apply to mailboxes.
True enough.
If you see them,
Does it make sense to have some sort of notice provision and time period here whereby the repairs have to be made?
Yeah, if that's not handled elsewhere, we might, we'll check.
all this would be enforced by code enforcement, would it not?
That's right.
And so the code enforcement processes and procedures would apply.
Mhm.
Down below, you refer to 30 days, a 30-day notice. And so I agree with Thomas. I would put like a 30-day notice there, and I would then leave the word shall. You have 30 days upon notice to, something with the sign that falls under those maintenance pieces, 30 days to bring it back to code. Otherwise the city shall require you to remove it.
Yeah, we can either spell that out or we can refer to wherever the enforcement is. I think it's at the bottom of this chapter.
Richard, what were you going to say?
Code enforcement has rules and regulations. It depends on what the fine is, whether it's silt or signs or whatever. There's a separate book that they follow.
Yeah, so a violation of this section would be addressed by code enforcement in its processes.
Correct.
It's interesting because we address the 30 days, though, for example, down below with removal of unsafe, unlawful, or abandoned signs. So if you just go below that, I mean, should we say removal of unsafe, unlawful, or abandoned? Is there a way to put in like signs that are not maintained, may be considered abandoned? I'm just wondering about connecting the two. I see that, I know that if we're looking for a one-stop shop, what are those requirements of, here are the requirements of maintaining it. If I don't, then where do I find out what those expectations are?
Well, I mean, Richard, can you answer that? If we're looking at this as the guiding document, should there be some kind of reference to time? So if, for example, your sign has a part falling off of it, and I assume somebody would complain or code enforcement would see it.
So literally, it's not 30 days. It needs to be fixed immediately, the next day or so. For example, last week when I was driving down Ashford Dunwoody by the construction site, that fence all came loose and was blowing. So I just called the guy right then. I said, "You got to get this fixed." He took it down the next day. So.
What makes sense for how this should read though? Because yeah, I mean, Erica's 100% right though. If we're going to put 30 days on 20-9 subsection 2, but no time period on 20-7, we probably ought to make those consistent. And if that is pointing to whatever code enforcement rules there are codified elsewhere, we may wish to refer to that specifically. Although certainly we don't want to give any more time than needed, especially if we're dealing with something that's unsafe. I mean, like you said, the immediate thing is, in certain cases, important, especially if it's in a roadway like the one you described. I saw that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's addressed, like the immediately repaired is addressed in there. If there's something that is dangerous, is deemed dangerous, it needs to be repaired immediately. That is in, what was that, 20.92 perhaps?
It's in one.
Or 20-9, 1 or 2.
One.
Yeah, so I think that's there. I guess I'm just looking to, we've said something, sign needs to be maintained. If you don't, the city shall have you remove it. Okay, it just feels vague to me as to when, like how many warnings do I get? Like we're so specific down below. I'm curious about why we're not more specific up above.
Yeah, I think what we can do there is reference the enforcement provisions.
And it's one item to consider is like that if it's more like aesthetic items, like our code enforcement process is typically kind of a written warning, and then at some point it escalates over time depending on the actions taken. And I think that's what we would want to do with the signs of general maintenance issues. Well, the other one with the unsafe, unlawful, or abandoned, and we're having sort of much graver issues with things that are unsafe, and this is stricter than our typical process with the 30 days towards removal. Well, our normal process is sort of a written warning, then another warning, then sort of time to fix it, then a citation, and so forth. So it's an escalating process. That's why it's spelled out separately for the unsafe and unlawful. But I think the general maintenance should follow the regular code enforcement process.
Well, I mean, I guess the point is you've heard the conversation about trying to reconcile some of the issues that have been raised. So if you just take that and come back with a recommendation. So the next section is any more on this one? Because we're going to go to 20-9. I was just going to point out that it references the standard building code, National Electric Code, and then it says International Building Code. Were those, should they all be the same or different for consistency's sake?
No, they're all individual documents, so they should all be listed as.
Okay. All right.
I have a question on 20-9-1 with the word, in particular, the word nuisance. Have we defined that? That to me, just, who would define something as a nuisance? What defines something as a nuisance? And going back to this idea, when we've talked about this before, you know, when it comes to signs, there's a lot of things that we cannot dictate what is on there or not on there. So the word nuisance was curious to me. So I am curious what defines nuisance and then how that would be determined.
It's for you, Sean, I guess.
The term nuisance would be defined in your municipal code. So I'm just looking at it now. There's a chapter on nuisances, chapter 22. I haven't studied it, but so generally the city would declare it a nuisance. I don't think it would be for content. It would be if it was creating some hazard or harm to the public, but you'd have to look to your local nuisance laws for that. And that's one you might want to have a little bit more open so that there can be a declaration, a little bit broader.
Like I mentioned earlier, when I drove down past the Ashford Dunwoody site, it was blocking, it was hitting our cars. So that's why I call it. That becomes a nuisance when it's blocking. It's not how it looks or anything.
So I think that would be chapter 22 of your municipal code called nuisances.
Right. So is your question answered, Erica? Okay. So moving on, 20.
Yeah, may I suggest on that section 2 about the danger provision? I would rather, or I would recommend that we not make the city's removal to require notice before it happens. It looks like the city may remove the sign immediately upon the issuance of notice to the owner, person, or firm. If there's a danger, I think the city should be free to move and then, you know, notice as quickly as practical. You know, again, having to wait to get in touch, or if we're going to use the word notice, you know, I don't know how that's defined. I think conditioning, fixing an unsafe situation on properly serving notice, identifying who the party is and serving them notice is probably not in the best interest of the city.
In other words, if you have an imminent danger, you're not going to wait to notify somebody to get rid of the danger.
We're going to fix the danger, and then notifying. That's pretty reasonable, but I don't think there should be a wait to do so.
Yeah, does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Anything else on 20-9? 20-10 permits.
That's carry forward from current section 20-23. Essentially, you need to have a permit before you erect a sign.
Any comments? 20-11.
That is also in your current code. Has to do with having a contractor's license and requisite insurance. Now, the limits are old and outdated, so if we want to increase those, but I don't know what the city's requirements are. So as far as for contractor insurance, it should probably match those.
Let me ask, and this may not be the right section for this, but what about mom and pop businesses that are putting their own sign up and it's otherwise in compliance with the sign ordinances? Do we need to cover self-service, or is being quiet on that? Does that make the most sense? I'm not sure. I'm asking for guidance, either, you know, Sean or Richard.
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be that if someone's erecting any of these signs that, I mean, we're talking about, and maybe that's let's see here. We need to maybe specify except for limited duration signs clearly. But for permanent signs, yes, because there are public safety issues relative to structure and making sure they don't fall down.
So, I mean, if let's say you had one of the buildings at Independence Square, and you were the owner, you could put, you want to put up your own sign. I don't think this would prohibit you from doing that because you're not a contractor. You're just doing it as the owner for that. You still need a permit, obviously,
Right.
and it would still have to be done to standard. But I don't think would have to have the other stuff that if you were doing it by yourself.
Okay. So we're prescribing it to erect a sign a contractor. It's not anybody must, okay. Yeah. So it may not be a question germane to this section anyway. Okay. All right.
20-12, non-commercial messages. Oh, you got more on number 11? Okay, go ahead.
Do we really want to have the number allowed as unlimited on this? Do we want to put some sort of limit on this, or can I just go crazy at the next election and put 500 signs in my yard?
So it's currently in the code like that.
Yeah, we were advised to put that language back in by your legal counsel.
So I thought we currently are limited to a couple signs.
I mean, could we even limit it to like 50? I mean,
Not-
could like
not
a
during election
high, but
season.
what's that?
Not during election season, it's unlimited in resident.
Per Georgia code or per?
Our code.
So our council thinks it's a free speech issue if we limit the number of signs, because I mean, I think that's what we're all speaking about, right?
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
Political season.
Could we have an absurd
Political-
high number that's still not unlimited, like 75? I mean, you could go pretty high without,
I haven't gone that high. I've been crazy, but not that crazy.
what's that? 50? I mean, something besides unlimited, just so you don't get some neighborhood. What's the correct term I'm trying to? Not troublemaker, but somebody that's trying to just kind of stir things up and create some
Agitator.
controversy. Agitator, thank you.
So this last election cycle was obviously exciting, and we all had some neighbors who got a little exuberant. I think exuberant might be a good word also. I don't think it's typical, and if there is a defined time, and I know I read a suggestion by someone, we said 4 months or maybe 2 groups of 2 months. If we limit the amount of time and we limit the sizes, then at some point, kind of like, for example, there's houses that around the holiday times that put out 100 blow-ups. And for 2 months, their front yard looks like an amusement park. It seems to be maybe just what happens on an every 4-year cycle where we might have somebody do that. I don't know if we want to spend so much time trying to overthink that.
Here's a fun little twist, right? We can't define what the sign says. So let's say that the next election cycle, I just put up an unlimited number of completely unrelated signs that have no political meaning. They just reflect my philosophies on an unlimited number of issues for 3 months. And you can't even mow the grass because there's so many. I mean, maybe we're just, I haven't seen somebody go super crazy, but I have seen people in my life that would do super crazy.
Duration, you really, political speech is the most protected speech. It's the highest level of scrutiny, right? So,
but this doesn't cover political speech. This covers a time period of yard signs. So what if I want to share my views on Bigfoot and UFOs and flat earth theory every other year for 3 months straight with my collection of 800 yard signs?
I'm going to come take a picture of your yard.
Probably.
You like daffodils.
There you go.
Well, I mean, right now, what do we have? Unlimited. So we've seen how it's worked.
Yeah, true. I guess we could.
And
There's a problem, fix it, and not until don't fix a
Well,
problem.
I mean, typically, for those who put out a lot of signs, it's typically because they're going to put out the candidates of the party that they're affiliated with.
Which 20 signs is not.
Well, I mean, think about it. You could have commissioners, representatives, senators, and all your constitutional officers. So that could be 20 signs. That could equal 20 signs pretty.
So put a number far higher, put 100.
Well,
Put some
but-
upper limit.
but the thing is though, I mean, getting to the point, this is what we have now.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything,
Right, well,
but,
let's.
but maybe now that you brought it up, it's gonna be crazy.
Let's leave it as it is until 10 years from now, somebody crazy comes by and it'll fix it.
Well, how about we throw it in our meeting minutes that hopefully council will review?
Yeah.
That we all expressed some kind of concern, despite the fact that it has worked previously.
Yeah, it's not been a problem. but
That this might be an issue for
Well-
council to take up.
I may be looking for a solution to a problem that's not there.
I mean, another thing to look at is what do other jurisdictions do?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to defer this to your legal counsel. It is a First Amendment issue. It probably has, there are probably issues in Georgia law that I'm not
Yeah.
licensed to talk about, so
Yeah,
I
mean,
I just defer that. I think your legal counsel will probably need to review this again and then advise the city on various
Yeah.
things. But this was one where we were advised to keep it in, so.
So if you could put a restriction, I mean, the argument I would make, just exactly what you said, Sean, is I'm affiliated with a party. I want everybody to know every candidate of the party that's running during this cycle. And it equals, let's say 20. But the law says you can only have 10 or 2. Then wait a second, you're restricting my ability to communicate my political message, which I should be allowed to do on my own property. And, yard signs, are typically a standard size. So you could regulate the size perhaps, but the quantity you're not allowing me to convey my deep, heartfelt, support of my party, let's say.
Right.
But anyway, I think that's a question that the city council and perhaps the city attorney may address in terms of the conversation for the future. But up to this point, we haven't seen anything crazy that I'm aware of. In fact, the one that you may recall is the church on Mount Vernon, and where Vermac crosses over. When they had the flagpoles open, it wasn't allowed by code because they would put up like quite a few flagpoles during the 4th of July time. And
Yeah, it was St. Luke's Church.
yeah, St. Luke's. So anyway, that's, I think the code was changed to accommodate that.
Yeah, one of the problems you run into by limiting duration is if you say you can only put it up during election cycle, you can only put it up for 3 months, then you are restraining someone's political speech for 9 months of the year. So that's where the problem lies. Because I don't see all your names, so I don't know your names. But one of the planning commissioners mentioned, I may have political views that I want to speak about by using a sign outside of an election cycle, and that would be protected speech. So again, there are a lot of, that's a sticky wicket, if you will. This particular issue really does deserve the attention of your legal counsel.
All right. We'll move into section 13.
Can I ask about the last sentence there? Do we want to require the permission of a property owner, or can we strike that 20-12 permissions required? Again, non-commercial messages. Are we saying that folks that rent houses can't put signs out without specifically speaking to the landlord about it? And do we want to do that?
Or is this more to address people just sticking signs in someone else's yard along the road
Okay.
during election cycles?
Yeah, I mean, if it's right of way, public property, the answer should be no sign. Other than
Well,
what it
they'd
says.
already says, so not be placed in the right of way, but I'm thinking of that, somebody renting a home, is that a constraint of their First Amendment rights to not allow them to place it in the home that they're renting? And again, the lease agreement would probably speak to that. So I don't, okay, yeah, I mean, I'm fine walking away on the issue because I understand why it's there, but I don't, I think that could be, that could represent a restraint of First
Well, I
Amendment
mean,
rights.
yeah, so if I lease a home, I'm not the property owner. Can I put a sign up, is what you're getting at.
That's correct.
So to be consistent with the other, where the same point comes out, whomever's in charge of the property to be able to give permission, and it could be typically 3 different: agent, tenant, owner.
Yeah, and what some codes have gone to is person in control or party in control. And that term kind of came up during the economic crisis back when banks owned a lot of real estate. And cities were trying to make sure that banks were responsible as the parties in control, even though they weren't the owners. They had the first lien on the property and they were in foreclosure. So, I mean, that's something to think about generally, rather than saying property owner. It's just do a blanket definition for, persons in control or party.
As we all know, property law, the law abhors property not being owned. So that's level one stuff, but yeah.
As long as it's not perpetuities, that's.
Yeah, that's right. Use of front. We're laughing at that one. All right, do you want to move on to the next section, 20-13?
This one is just referring to planned development districts, and this is in your current code. And essentially, if you're in a PD, then you have to bring a sign plan with all proposed signs in the plan development for approval as part of the PD process. That talks about that.
So if you have a PD, it dictates that wherever the sign is going to be, it's going to be part of the PD.
Yeah, that's your master plan, your concept plan, your final development plan, that kind of thing. Yep.
Any more comments on that, folks? All right, section 14.
All right.
Prohibited signs.
So for the most part, this is the same as what you have. There are a couple of changes. Everything that's, well, I shouldn't say that's, we'll go through them, but most things that are currently prohibited will remain prohibited. We've made a couple of exceptions for some signs. We can just walk through these real quick. Dilapidated signs. That should say dilapidated signs. Get rid of the or signs, including sign structures, obviously remain prohibited. Animated signs, including balloons, streamers, air or gas-filled figures.
Balloons we will see on weekends, real estate signs, typically the directional one that says house for sale down the street. And the agents will put a balloon on it.
Does this mean balloon, or is this like one of those hot air balloons?
Well, it still has to be it still has to meet the definition of a sign.
Right.
So balloon.
My question is, how is that accommodated? Because it's come up before.
I've seen, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen this in Los Angeles a lot. They almost look like hot air balloons that are blown up sitting on top of a building with a sign on it. I think that might be what this is referencing, not tying a balloon to a sign, but rather actually having the balloon itself become a sign.
Right.
Well, then balloons is a vague term. It has multiple definitions, right? You're talking about balloons, which I fully get. But I just referenced one where I know agents use balloons to highlight their small yard sign.
And typically they put those signs wherever they want. So they're not illegal anyway. So
No, they're probably not. They seem to be tolerated though. They're not legal.
The human activity, that's not the kind of sign where, for example, someone's standing there and like holding the sign, moving it back and forth and dancing with it. Is that the kind of thing we're referring to, or someone actually sitting there behind a sign, turning a crank to make the sign glow, as an example? What do you mean by that? That was a curious one to read.
That is, just looking here, I believe, from your current code. And let's see here, where is that? Animated sign. Yeah, so in the exemptions currently, or sorry, prohibitions currently, I believe that's from it. I'm just trying to find it. And what would that mean? Yeah, there have been some cases about those human boards in particular. There was one for a tax place that a guy was dressed up as a Lady Liberty walking around the street. Was that an illegal sign? So, I mean, there's been a lot of that kind of stuff. So your point's a good one. Now, you know, there are, let's see here, prohibited signs.
Sign spinners would be a good example.
Yep.
Twirling a sign.
Right, the person who sits there, right, and not to mention, they're kind of an illegally placed sign anyhow, because they tend to stand in the corner blocking traffic dancing.
Yes. Usually in the
Entertaining to
right way.
watch, but okay, that I was just trying to understand what that, if that meant there. In the beginning, we focused on illustrations and that we were showing pictures of things. I wonder if it might help to elaborate or perhaps give examples of, like with Richard saying, you know, a sign spinner, someone spinning a sign, or to help with the balloon one to include a picture of one of those hot air balloons, like this is what we mean, or the Statue of Liberty, like these are the types of things that we are prohibiting.
Yes, we could certainly do that. So there are a couple schools of thought on that. One is, do you want to be so specific that you would exclude things that you didn't put as examples in there, or do you want to be a little more general so that you can sweep more generally
Right.
based on discretion? And so that's really a city policy sort of discussion.
Now, from the code enforcement spectrum, I would, the more broad it is, rather than being so specific.
Right.
Well, one of the things that concerns me just by this definition is, you know, I think might involve First Amendment as well, in the sense that when could a person be a sign? That same apartment complex you discussed earlier, Erica, used to have a gorilla dressed in advertising. I don't even know if the gorilla held a sign, but they stood out in front and
True.
waved and accosted people, and I don't know, generally encouraged people to rent from that place. I don't know if the person's a sign, but certainly we do have First Amendment implications if that person feels compelled to speak about that complex. I don't know. There's some weird territory here.
Yeah. I just want to go on record of saying, section 3, what's Batman gonna do? We might want to reconsider that for
Great
superheroes.
question.
Well, no, but section 3, actually, I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because that actually cross-references with section 2020, which is flags and flagpoles.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to hold folks to proper flag etiquette, I believe proper flag etiquette when flying the flag at night requires illuminating the flag skyward. And so, again, here we are in constitutional territory, but we may need to carve out an exception depending on how we define searchlight.
Yeah, that would be an illuminated flag that would be illuminated through indirect illumination, such as a flood, a ground flood fixture. I will have to look, when we get there, we can talk about that, but this would not, if you look at the definition of beacon sign / searchlight, that's in from your current code, that would not fall under that.
No, that's a very special light. I've seen those before and they are moving. It's like a disco party.
No, I grew up
In
in
the middle of
Orlando. We had them all over the place. Yeah, no, I know, but again,
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is take any kind of ambiguity out here.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I want to make sure folks, if they want to fly their flags, that they're able to do so without stepping on this. So I don't know. If it doesn't fit the definition, I'm comfortable walking on. But I also wanted to ask in section 4 there, is that pointing at the right section, section 4 with the exception? Did you, is that pointing at the right section? Section 4 with the exception? the secondary perimeter center signs, or should that be pointing to another section?
That would point to perimeter, secondary perimeter.
Okay, okay, so that was intentional. That's
Yeah.
a strict carve out from this.
Yes, correct.
Okay. But just secondary sign types, not whatever primary sign types.
That's my understanding. We can take a look at it when we get down there.
Okay.
So which number are we on now? Well,
We're on 4.
electronic message, changeable copy, electronic signs. These are, I guess, kind of like the billboard that's at Mount Vernon in Perimeter Center West. Is
Yeah.
that what this refers to? So you wouldn't be allowed to have any of those. The sign that's not working now in front of perimeter wall of Asher Dunwoody would be an example of this, I think.
Or what about, so schools are exempt for this though, right? Because a lot of several of our schools, I know Peachtree has an electronic sign. So would school,
It does, but do our regulations apply to school property?
that's what I was just double checking. I feel like we've asked this question 1,000 different times. I don't think so, but Richard, you would probably be more,
Yeah, you're correct. It's not applicable to schools.
okay.
So they can have the,
Liking inflatable guy.
all right.
Searchlight for Batman.
The LE, okay, then,
This one's a new, number 5 is a new prohibition. LED strip and rope lighting on the exterior of any building, any window, or otherwise visible from the outside of a building. I don't know if you've seen this, but people are putting this LED rope lighting inside of windows for businesses. It just
yeah,
isn't
so,
aesthetic.
well, first you have number 5, which is exterior. Let me ask you about areas that might have outdoor seating, and then they hang up LED
Party lights or
rope.
something.
Well, I say party lights, but you know, they're about this far apart, and they just are over the seating. Would that be prohibited by this?
No.
This
No, I
is,
think-
this is a very different kind of lighting. I'm very familiar with this lighting because I have a teenager too, and they both have it. And I can walk around my neighborhood and actually look at homes and go, oh, they've got a teenager too, because
Yes.
the kids are all into this. I am happy to leave 5 in. It's quite tacky. And it's not the beautiful, what you're talking about, Bob, is cafe lighting, which is where they hang the string lights, which actually have individual bulbs. This is very different. Think of it as tiny pinpoint lights that, yeah, no, it's,
They flash, they rotate. My kids have them in their room too. Yeah, it's a whole deal.
yeah.
But they've made their way into businesses because they're colorful and they flash and they get your attention, especially like vape shops and check cashing store, all kind of stuff, liquor stores. You'll see them, yeah. So it's just it's not a real attractive deal. It can be distracting to drivers, etc. Okay. The next one is from your current code as well. These are multi-face, more than 2 sides, tri-vision signs. We're not going to allow these triangular things. I don't think that's a huge deal as much anymore, but it could still happen. Neon or LED tube rope lighting resembling neon, sort of more of that, of the same. Window signs larger than 3 square feet in total area. So you'll have neon signs that say open. You see those all over the place. Obviously, we can't regulate what it says, but we can regulate the size and the location. And so this would be, accommodating essentially an open sign. You also sometimes see, beer advertising sign, Heineken or Coors Light, whatever. We're just saying, hey, it has to be relatively small.
Sean, may I ask how we're calculating that? Because I could conceivably see a neon sign being calculated both ways under 20-3 2B, either letter by letter or by the background, since a lot of the neon signs that I see are mounted on some sort of background. How would we calculate 3 square feet?
It would be, let's see here.
Yeah, I mean, is it the outer dimensions of the neon of the glass?
It would be, yeah, we can add something in there about that.
Yeah, I mean, and what if it's oval? It's not square, obviously. How do you, I mean,
Yeah, you'd have to draw, it's sort of like the business name on the left. You'd have to draw a something around it to box it in.
I was about to say, you're gonna have to differentiate something there.
We can do something there with those types of signs. Let's
yeah,
see.
I think the point is clarify how you measure the 3 feet.
Yeah.
Number 8, pole signs and pylon signs. Let me begin. Some of the, I'll give you an example over on Shammy, Dunwoody, and Peeler. You have signs, like I say, Advantage Real Estate, and then it has poles holding it up, which I wooden square, which I assume are pylon signs. Would that be prohibited?
So is that a limited duration? You mean like a for lease sign or for sale sign, or is it?
It's a for sale sign or for lease sign.
Yeah, we address those below in limited duration sign yard large. Of course, we can't differentiate them based on what their purpose is, for sale or for lease, but we do have a provision in here we can talk about a little later
Okay,
on
so
large yard signs, and so that would be allowed. That would be okay.
So does this cover, like, I don't know, I think they're called like feather banners or whatever that sticker, what, I guess I'm not exactly sure what a pole and pylon sign is.
A pole and a pylon sign, well, you, so let's see here. There's an exception for wayfinding signs, freestanding signs, and temporary banner signs. Temporary banner signs might be what you're talking about. But a pole sign is supported by a pole, pylon sign, interstate style, gas station sign.
Okay.
You know, not ground mounted necessarily like a monument sign would be, where there's a base, but it's stuck on poles.
Okay. Okay. So just more generic than that. Okay.
Yeah.
So we move on. Portable signs. Is that the same as today?
It is, and this was one, yeah, so this is the same. I'm just looking here to make sure. Yeah, and that's defined below, portable sign. There is an exception here for, let's see here. Or other permanent structure or sign designed to be transported include. There's an exception here for wrapped or painted on a moving vehicle. So what we're trying to get away from is obviously parking a truck, wrapping it and parking it stationary. It really shouldn't be an additional sign. So it has to be, you know, there are trucks, obviously, and cars that are wrapped and painted. And so that's fine. But if it's parked, essentially, it's going to be mostly about intention. I mean, you're going to have to get into the intent of this whole thing. And that's a tough one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a
Go
couple
ahead.
of things. I mean, when you say a property licensed business, at that location or any property licensed business. So if I have I'm trying to think of an example. If I have Anderson windows, you know, all over my car wrapped, and I'm parked at another place, is that okay? Or do I have to be parked where that Anderson Windows retail location is licensed?
I think it's, well, no, I think if it's an actual business, I think that's what it's trying to say. That if it's a going concern, then it's okay wherever it's parked.
But is it going concern at the location where it's being parked? Or it just happens to be a going concern anywhere?
Let's see here.
Well, let me further refine that, because we had an issue just like this in our neighborhood with somebody who brought their work truck home and got reported for parking their work truck at home, which was a labeled work truck. I think we need to specify at least non-residential versus residential, because does your concern go away if they specify that?
Well, to just complicate this more, because I guess I think like this. What if I make a deal with the business next door and we each park each other's trucks right by the entrance of not our business, mine's at his business. That's just where I leave it.
I mean, you'll see that. I mean, right here at the shopping center next door, Edible Arrangements and Memphis Barbecue each have their own trucks that they'll park out front because of the advertising that it gives to them. And so this is to suggest that would be allowed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And we busted those people
Right.
next door.
So if on the other hand, I parked over there, what's another good business?
Let's say that Memphis Barbecue works out a deal to park their truck up in the village.
Right. Would that be okay? That Memphis Barbecue truck park at Dunwoody Village at one of the spots there.
It would not be okay.
Okay, so it's just,
It's saying, look, if you have a vehicle that's part of your business, it can display your business, and if it's actively being used for your business, and then you need to park it somewhere that it's not intended to be a sign, essentially. So you're trying to get around the loophole.
This is strange territory. I have a neighbor who apparently is probably a travel agent. I'm not sure, but their car is a Sandals beach car, right? Everywhere they drive, everywhere they go, it's come on a Sandals vacation, Sandals beach car. Their point of business is their home, but they drive and they park. So if they were to drive and park in the MARTA parking lot, if they were to drive to the mall and leave it, there for the day. We have parking regulation that doesn't allow people to leave their cars parked overnight, I believe. We start getting in funny business when I think we try to micromanage some of these wrapped cars, like how long can they park there? Well, how do we know? I mean, judging their intent is very difficult. Alternatively, there are these trucks that have flatbeds at the end, and they put these TP billboard signs, traveling billboard signs. Now that to me is a very obvious attempt. Like if that's sitting there on the street all day long, well, that's a billboard sign. That's not someone's personal vehicle that maybe they've just decided to shop at Perimeter Mall for 4 hours and advertise, because yes, that's what they're doing. That's why they wrap their cars. It's a tax write-off, it's a whole bunch of stuff.
Erica, you've keyed into the residential versus the non-residential thing that I was talking about. From my perspective, I'm a little bit less potentially irritated by seeing one of those placard cars or the Sandals car at an unrelated business, say at the mall, but parked in a driveway permanently or parked out on the street or in some place where we come across it. I could see wanting to chill that behavior. Are we on the same page there?
Yes and no. I'll use a great neighbor who probably everyone here knows, Hayward Westcott. He has custom signs on his truck. It's his work truck, and on it he's put his logo. And I lived down the street from him, and he parked his car outside in his driveway every day. And there's not a single person, if you didn't live there or drive by, that wouldn't see custom signs on his truck. but it was in his driveway. So,
And I think it's complaint-based because I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, that our friends that run the Mad Italian had complaints lodged at them for bringing the Mad Italian truck home. Similar position to Hayward, but they weren't advertising. It was just easy to take the van home or whatever that was.
Yeah.
And I believe that an official complaint was lodged with the city and they were asked to park that van elsewhere. At least that's what I was told, hearsay. But I mean, it's complaint-based. So what do we want the law to read? What do we think makes sense for the law to read? Do we want to allow that? Or do we want to prevent it? Yeah, I don't know that I have a great answer to it because Hayward and Tom and these folks that live in our neighborhood should be able to commute in vehicles that have their names on them. But then it's potentially open for abuse too. So
this is
Right.
another one that has First Amendment implications, and well, they all do, but this one particularly was one that the city attorney asked us to include. And the portable signs are currently prohibited in your code with this exception, and this exception is found at 20-51-15. It's exactly the same language. So I would defer on this one again, because this was a specific comment from your city attorney. So there must be something that he was concerned about. And again, I have to defer to him because there could be some Georgia law that I don't know about that could be controlling this too.
I mean, the idea behind it though is you want to allow a business to park its vehicle essentially overnight at its business. What you don't want is for the business of wrapping vehicles and just parking them throughout the city, wherever you can get permission by the owner of that property that advertises your business that's not located there.
So technically, I'm thinking, let's say that I own a locksmith business that I run out of my house. I could then, under this, park that truck in my driveway because it's in the furthest available parking spot from a right of way,
Yeah, I mean,
correct?
yeah, I mean, but
But are you using it? That's the question, right? So you're driving it.
Well, let's say I run it out of my house, so I have all my tools and everything in that truck, and so that's just, I use it for my business. I'm just,
Sure.
I don't have necessarily a strong opinion. I'm just trying to clarify,
Yeah.
are we
This
going to
would-
be infringing on someone's business if we say you can't park, we say, well, he can park that truck there, but the Mad Italian guy can't park that truck there.
Right.
you could be, remember back when they had, let's say it would say AT&T on this, just AT&T logo. A car, right? A company car, and the employee drives the car home. That is an advertisement.
Yes.
So anyway, I mean, we've got to move on, I guess. But
Yeah, if the attorney said this is the language, I don't think we need to
yeah, I mean,
beat it to death, but I'm just. busy
well, you've heard our
thinking of all kinds of
conversation
loopholes.
about this. Hopefully you've gleaned something from it. And we
Yes.
can move on to some of the next things here.
Well, I'm on all these conversations, I'm highlighting these provisions so that we can follow up
Right.
as
We-
necessary.
We do have a fair amount to go.
Yeah.
So number 10 is no signs on public right of way, except what the city puts up, basically.
Correct.
Thoughts on that? Okay. 11, which are obscene as defined by the code. So
Correct.
I assume we have that now.
Yes.
Any comments or questions with that? Signs that visually stimulate an official traffic, simulate it, yeah. So no copycat signs for what the traffic control devices are.
Right.
Sounds,
Yep. No noisy signs, no sound
Okay.
being emitted.
14 is visibility, create a traffic hazard. Any thoughts on that, folks? All right. Signs, so we don't like the signs that are tacked to the utility pole.
Right.
well, but this is kind of one of those, and we've even talked about this before. The fence signs, and I'm thinking in the context like the sign that we were discussing earlier on the construction there.
You've got that sign which that should be a separate code section, right? We brought it up before.
Okay, so we're not discussing those, or we're not discussing what tennis courts are putting on their fences with their club name or anything like that? Those are covered elsewhere in the code?
So
Okay.
you
I'm
need
not
to answer
sure.
that question. How are we regulating the signage for construction fences?
Construction fences and sports fields.
Yeah, ball fields.
Because
Sports
if
field,
you're,
that's another
well, yeah,
one.
if you're talking, you said tennis, and that got me thinking about, you got, I don't know if you have, people, sponsors, and if you can see them from the road, I don't,
Right.
Right.
Yeah, the construction fence is handled by an amendment that council passed last year.
Okay, so that's out of there, but okay.
The others might be temporary
Yeah.
banners. Might be
Okay.
temporary banners. We could talk about those.
What about the little logo that goes on some of the fences? It's like Chambly Fence Company or
Mhm. The sign erector, sign manufacturer logo. Maybe we say that,
that's come up before.
yeah,
And we want,
fence.
that, I guess we want to give the sign company a break for that.
Yeah, we'll highlight that. Because then the question is, how big can it be? And then we have to create a whole sign type around those. And
No bigger than a license plate.
yeah, maybe that's what you say, fence other than signs affixed by the erector of the fence, no more than 1 square foot or something like that. I don't know.
We're currently regulating those as temporary banners, the ones that people put that are not construction fence wrapped, but that the companies put on.
Like the baseball field signs or temporary signs?
Yep.
What about like the tennis court,
Yeah.
the lament that they place along the fences of tennis courts? A lot of times they have the club name on it or that sort of thing. Is that a temporary sign or what is that?
I'm not sure about tennis courts, but the
Okay.
baseball field ones are
those are
temporary.
usually pretty
Okay.
big, and you can definitely see them from the road.
Yeah, is there a way to address that? And I mean, and again, I'm not necessarily trying to invent language or invent problems, but it may be something that we want to address because I'm pretty sure there's going to be something we encounter.
The question is, do you want to ban them? Or do you just want to regulate
It's true. It's not on
something about them? Because if you want to regulate something about them, we can do that through the temporary banner sign or banner sign. But if you just want to prohibit them, we can make a statement about prohibition.
I don't really want to prohibit, they seem to be pretty innocuous. They're usually kind of white and green. kind
Yeah,
of blend in with
I
the
think it's
courts.
reasonable to allow, and yeah, usually like any sponsorships that are happening are temporary signs as opposed to something permanently affixed on the layman. Yeah, I don't want to chill that. I would rather just, yeah, I'd rather it not be completely precluded by statute here or by code, which kind of seems like it might be here.
Moving on. 16.
We can say, I think what you're getting at though is a good point, is we can say other than temporary banner signs or something like that,
Okay.
and make an exception there.
Which
So
are
that-
separately defined.
Yeah, so why don't we do that? That's a good point. Okay. All right.
Don't want to attach to any kind of fire escape. That makes sense. Any comments on that? Wanted to conform to state electrical code. And signs that are in violations of any zoning district or zoning overlay district. So whatever is in that code that prohibits anything that says you can't do that. That is structurally unsound or is a hazard to traffic or pedestrians. And any sign that changes colors, flashes, blinks, oscillates. That was the billboards that we dealt with.
That's also going to cover, I mean, you've got some, duplication here, but that's not a bad thing when it comes to like LED strip and rope lighting. You can't have it. But you also can't have any, you can't have any light, well, any sign that flashes or blinks or changes colors. So that also takes care of that.
Will I be allowed to have my tacky Halloween thing? or Christmas?
Well, we can get into exempt signs next.
All right, anything else on prohibited exempt signs?
Exempt signs. So the big change in this section has to do with window signs. The current language with window signs talks about, and I'll find it here, talks about the pane or let me see here real quick, sorry. The window sign talks about panes of glass, I believe, instead of the entire glass feature, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm just going to find where that is now. Sorry. Where is it?
You want to go through these one by one, or?
Yeah, that's the first one, is window signs. And that is one where we want to look at the entire area of glazing to determine how much of that can include a sign, rather than what it says now, which is, if I could find it, that would be helpful. Where it says now, it talks about individual window frames. So if you had like a window with mullions, you would be looking at an individual mullion. You could interpret it that way, versus what it's really trying to get at is the total area of the glazing, of the glass.
Of the owned property?
I'm sorry?
Of the owned property. So one would look at the entire glazed area of the property, and 30% of that would be anything below 30% of the total glazed area.
Then you could do that by right as an exempt sign. Yep.
Okay. Now, how does that square with the window sign, the limitation in the neon, window signs of larger than three square feet? If something that's 2 at 11 square feet is more than 30%, what controls? Does it matter?
Specific to neon, you could only do up to 3 square feet. If that's less than 30%, you're good.
Okay. But if it's more than 30%, you got to go with the smaller of the two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Sean, we may need to revisit the 30% because we just had a store yesterday put up 30% of the signs, and it looks awful.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's too much then. Yeah. I mean, if you think about a big, your typical, like a strip mall, right? Your typical, storefront glass, storefront system, we would call it. It's all glass for the most part. If you think about 30% of that, yeah, maybe that's a little steep. 70% open though still. It's not out of the realm.
You see a lot of it at the convenience stores.
Yeah. Caleb, did you have some insight there? Sorry, you're on mute.
I did want to jump in there. I do think the convenience store is a good sort of policy consideration for the Planning Commission. The issue we've seen in other communities locally is that, imagine having 10 equally sized storefronts windows on a convenience store, and they're going to want to put the biggest sign they can. So they're going to put all 3 adjacent. And so there is a value to think about whether it is some smaller subsection of the window, the actual window storefront structure, versus the entire building, because you may end up with cases where someone just covers a third of the full facade with a Metro PCS sign or something like that, or a Buy Coca-Cola sign. So I do agree with Sean that.
Well, I was going to say, along those same lines, if the building rounds a corner, is that glazing on the lesser used corner? If that counts, theoretically, if that's a big face, you could use a substantial sign on one side. To Caleb's point.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think we need to be more specific about where, and you could say 30% of, or X% of the total area of window glazing within X number of feet of the primary pedestrian entrance. You could say only X% of total area of window glazing on that fronts the primary road or the main thoroughfare or whatever, however we're defining it, that kind of thing, so that you avoid that. So yeah, it sounds like we need to revisit this section and be more specific and maybe address the amount as well.
Can I ask a question about, as we talk about this, and maybe it's not so popular anymore, but where does painting windows fall into any of this? Like using your actual window as the sign, painting a sign onto it. Is that addressed anywhere in here?
I believe I'll have to look and see if that's in here, but I believe we do address that, that no sign shall be painted on the window. I have to look. If not, it would still only allowed, it would be a sign and it would only be allowed to be up to that percentage of the window area.
Right, that's what I was curious, because I didn't see painting in there as an addressed medium. So I was wondering if that was again, a loophole.
Let me look here.
You want to move on? Door signs 3 feet to where? Any comments? 3 is yard signs.
Let me get out of that.
I guess you have to go to that smaller yard signs to the other section. Do you need to define large yard signs here too?
If they're exempt, so these would be exempt from a permit. Are you currently, Richard, requiring a permit for like a CBRE for lease sign, or is that, you don't need a permit for that?
When they get large.
Yeah, they're big. So do you require a permit?
Yes, for the big signs we do. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, then that would not be exempt. Only the small yard signs would be.
Okay. Street numbers. That's 4 flags.
I have a question on this one.
What's that?
It discusses in that last sentence, the height. Is there a limit to the height of flagpoles that's exempt?
Well, there's a section on flagpoles that follows.
It's not
So-
referenced, is why I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, there's a height limit on flagpoles when you go to that section.
Yeah, you could.
2020.
Because on page
18.
So yeah, I just think we ought to, since we discuss height here, we ought to at least reference 20-20. Just a cross-reference just to clarify.
Yeah. Do that.
well, each of these or many of these will have sections that are,
Or just even the phrase that see applicable regulations here, and just something to let the reader know, hey, later on in the ordinance are the details about this.
Yeah.
all right. All right, so what next?
These are non-governmental traffic control signs, city type stuff, that's all exempt. This is, to someone's point earlier, non-LED string lights used in outdoor spaces. So that's your cafe lighting, out in your outdoor patio. Those are exempt. You obviously don't have to have a permit for that as long as they're not an animated sign.
Can I ask why non-LED? I have cafe lights, but they're LED. Because LED bulbs, I mean, are just kind of the way bulbs go now.
Yeah. I think this is trying to get at a certain look. And that LED, I think the concern is that those would be like the LED ropes. So we're trying to differentiate them somehow. But I don't think there would be any issue, obviously, with using LED bulbs. So
Today,
But LED string lights, non-LED string lights look the
The same.
same. I think we might be in tenuous territory here because my whole house is LED and you couldn't tell the difference between it being an incandescent bulb or an LED bulb because we've come so far with technology. So I feel like this language here might need to be redefined.
is that,
I mean, yeah, I mean, they have evolved. I mean, it's just like Christmas tree lights evolved. Everything's LED these days. So I would agree with the idea that you don't want them animated. And now I will say this, you can buy the LED string lights that look like the old ones. And they also will change colors as you program them. Now, I don't know how that should be restricted or not.
Right. Well, I think actually that was something that was before, and that's maybe what we want to get to is not moving, not color changing, you know, because I don't think we're wanting to, there's a difference between a rope light and a string light. And so again, there might need to be a place where we define some of these things. Those in the world of fun lighting will understand the difference. But I don't think we want to get hung up on LED versus non-LED. I don't think that's where we're trying to differentiate.
Well, and we want to make sure we allow folks to put up their holiday lights.
yeah, and you know, frankly, as long as it's not an animated sign, it's not even a sign. I mean, I don't know why we're even getting into this here. It's potentially just part of an exterior or outdoor lighting section of your code. So I'm not sure that this is even necessary since we already ban animated signs.
I mean, I could see someone using, for example, LED string lights to highlight the exterior of their sign, right? Like they might hang it up, or maybe it's the holiday time and they decide to decorate it with I don't know, garland that's got like, you know, a string light wrapped in it. So I see where this could become part of the signs. But again, I think in terms of defining it as non-LED, we're getting to the wrong thing.
Yeah, I agree. We can take that out. LED signs and similar type technologies are currently prohibited in your current code. So we'll move away from that.
I think at a time, LED signs were referred to or thought of as, you know, more the changeable kind of signs, you know.
Yeah.
Like a pixelation in a TV.
Dot matrices.
I think that's
Dot
right.
matrix signs, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to, we're okay with government mandated signs. The next 9 is menu signs, and this has to do with your drive-throughs. Okay. All right. Sandwich boards, see applicable regulations. There's a whole section on that. Then you have temporary banner signs, which would be allowed in applicable regulations. Let me just ask you a brief question. It was just brought up. So holiday lights, as beautiful or as gaudy as we want to make them, right? Flashy, blinking, and when you put up the inflatables, they are sometimes move, right? And in fact, you may even see Rudolph moving his head up and down.
Are those signs or decorations?
Well, that's my question. They're not signs, are they? Okay. Because we do talk about string lights, and I never thought of them as being signs before. Hence my question.
It's a good question.
I think that's a good reason. Eric
Yes,
Seven.
you're on mute, Erica.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. That was addressed, Bob. Oh, gosh, now I have to, sorry, I'm scrolling through. When we were, so 2014, Balloons, streamers, air or gas-filled figures. So air or gas-filled figures would address your blow up, holiday moving Rudolph. That's prohibited.
Yeah, and
Which-
there's a definition problem because the wacky waving inflatable arm guy is every bit as inflatable as Rudolph is. I'm talking about the tubes that are
Yeah.
in front of
Yes.
check cashing places or Better Call Saul, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we can really get into the weeds with the definitions here.
Right.
That's a tough one.
Yes,
No,
and so the
I-
question is, are we like, do they need to have, well,
So I would
that's
recommend,
a good question.
I would recommend exempting them expressly as holiday light decorations or something.
So what if I have an interesting religion that celebrates a holiday every other day?
Well, then you're gonna probably have to come sue the city and make
So
your case.
this, I almost want to suggest we treat this like the unlimited yard signs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
wait until there's a problem before we
It's like
dig into this.
my calendar populates holidays I didn't know existed. But they're there.
Yeah.
Because
The intent is to make sure you don't have wacky waving inflatable arm guy in front of your business.
Right.
Not that you don't put up a holiday inflatable Rudolph or something.
But what I would say is, let's remember, it says that we're talking about prohibited signs. And so we're assuming, for example, that this blow up thing is holding a sign to
Well, it's very
advertise
loud.
something. I don't think most holiday blow ups that we have, if you were to blow up a polar bear or, I don't think most would fall into the sign
I
category.
could put Rob's air conditioning on the side of my holiday. Blow up a polar bear. I mean, we're going down a rabbit hole.
We
I
are.
think, I say we leave this kind of as is and wait until somebody causes a problem 5 years from now and then revisit.
well, yes. So anyway, you've got a
Well,
whole
there's also-
category of unknowns here that whether other jurisdictions have addressed it, perhaps you could bring forward any kind of thoughts you have on that.
Absolutely. Typically, we see those exempt. And so we could add in exempt language relative to holiday decorations and things. I mean, the city's not gonna most likely enforce anything.
I don't think it's the city that we worry about. I think it's the resident who files a complaint. And then that forces the city's hand.
Yeah,
Because, for example, with the flagpoles that were at St. Luke's, the city never said a thing about it until someone decided to force the city's hand on it. So,
Right.
And then they
yeah.
address-
All right. So let's move on to, if we can, defined sign terms. We need to go through every one of these. Is there anything that's?
From my perspective, as long as those items that we talked about earlier needing definition get added to this.
Yeah, the more definitions for unique terms that are used in a document, the
Mhm.
better.
Yes.
And I trust me, I say that as a lawyer, when you see a defined term that's not defined somewhere else, it's like, what does this mean?
Right.
It equals lawsuit.
Yep.
I kid you not. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. Several $100,000 case over what does the term gross margin mean? Capitalized but not defined. One side has one definition, the other has a diametrically opposite definition. It's been in litigation for 3 years.
Yeah, consistency is really key. Now there is a question of how far we go as far as defining everything to a T, like we talked about earlier, but yeah, they have to be consistent. I agree. So we'll just make sure of that.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway. All right, any more comments on that section for defined terms? Okay. Defined sign types. This is when we get into the pictures, and I guess it's kind of like our zoning code, moving more towards the picture kind of things. So just going through that, is there anything that strikes people's attention as we look at, for example, projecting blade signs, wall signs, awning signs, canopy signs? How do you distinguish between the canopy and an awning?
It's a great question. The awning is what you would consider to be a sloping. It would be a sloping type valance with a valance. The canopy is going to be a flat overhang that the sign sits on top of, versus the awning, which is the sloping with the valance that the sign is actually lettered onto.
Okay.
Now, some places will combine them, and I think it's better to separate them.
Yeah, painted wall, mural signs, building entrance wall signs. Going through, if anything strikes anybody, speak out. Roof signs.
Now that's a new one. That one currently is prohibited in your code. And so we had lots of discussions about whether we allow them in certain places, like the perimeter, where there are more and more uses, whether it's a brewery or some kind of other commercial use, where they're putting up these cool roof signs. And there was an example from a nearby jurisdiction. I don't recall exactly which one, Richard.
Chambly.
Yes, Chambly.
You see it in Chambly on Peachtree Boulevard.
Yeah.
I love their sign.
So that was an example of, yeah, exactly. We love that. Why can't we do that in Dunwoody? So that's what this addresses essentially.
May we consider putting more contrast in the picture that goes with this? Because at least as it printed out here, it's very washed out, and it's kind of hard to tell what it is. I mean, I think we want them, but the other pictures that I've seen so far kind of tell a better story than this one does.
Yes, we will get with Caleb on that one.
All right, moving along, single panel monument sign, multi-panel monument sign, residential monument sign, wayfaring, free hanging signs, window signs. And we had that discussion earlier about what is a window and 30%. This may be a place to bring them together so that they kind of help answer the question. Limited duration, a banner sign, a logo. I know mine says Campari on it, or not. A double sign, a yard sign. So when we had there, before we talked about small yard signs, but this is just a yard sign.
Right.
All right. Entrance wall banner. So what is not in here is a banner that's held up by, let's say, 2 metal stakes. So that would not be allowed anymore. It's allowed at all now. And let me just say, where oftentimes you'll see that when, celebration of, for example, a subdivision high school kids graduating, they'll show their name and maybe school that they're going to, or just the fact that they were graduates of the class of 2020. So is that a prohibited activity? Or activity sign?
Yeah, they're included.
They're what, permitted?
They're included, so you can't have those.
But you could have fixed them to the entrance of the subdivision.
Yes.
John, yeah.
So if your subdivision doesn't have an entrance sign, you couldn't have anything. But if it has an entrance sign, you could affix it to that entrance sign.
Do we want to have a picture of a door sign? We dedicate 2015 one to it, but I mean, I know we have a picture of a window sign, so that may not be necessary, but does it make sense to add that?
You mean a window sign?
No, a door sign, a door sign. We've got definitions and pictures here, and we've got, you know, a specific exempt
we have a door
door
sign?
sign, but we don't have a picture of a door sign.
That's a good question. Would you want to add a door sign?
We could do that. So the window sign, we could add a door sign. We could do that. What we're trying to do here is set up the different permitted sign types. And so, yeah, if it's permitted, only 3 square feet, we could do that. That's fine. That makes sense. Generally, what we're trying to set up here, though, is here is your menu of building mounted, ground mounted, and then your window and door, we could call them, window and door signs, and then your limited duration signs.
Okay.
So this sets up the menu. These are the definitions with the pictures. So that's a good suggestion. We can do that.
All right. So now we are moving on to the gasoline station pump island signs.
Yes, that's your from your existing code, and that is one that we were advised to pull forward. And this just addresses, I don't think you have a ton of gas stations. There are a couple I know of. But this essentially is the signage on the pump island canopy. And then any signage specific to gasoline stations. Now, my understanding is there is, I believe, state law that specifically calls out these types of signs for this type of use.
So I have seen pumps that have, a screen on it that gives me an advertisement and talks to me. Is that allowed?
Yeah, that would not be covered by this section. That is not regulated.
So, but it'd be disallowed, right? Because you say we can't have changeable signs. We can't have signs that talk to you.
Right. Question is it a sign?
Right,
And
it's
is it visible from the public right of way?
I mean, it may not be visible, just to the person getting gas, but I'm just questioning that and I say this in the sense that if it's allowed in one place and somebody says, hey, I want to do the same thing as you're doing, and you're not letting me do it. The gas station can do it. Why can't I do it?
Mm-hmm.
So that's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think you would be able to differentiate the legitimate governmental interest in regulating that versus not regulating the one on the gas station, just because.
So I would think if you said you can do it here, while you said you can't do it there, then it's in the code.
Yeah, if you can justify it, if it's in the code, maybe if you can justify it. I don't see, maybe we just say that a 1 square foot
signs integrated into the filling device.
Yeah, is exempt, or just put it in here and say that that's okay specifically. That makes sense there. I mean, but I'm not sure where else someone would argue that they would want that, but would it make sense in another context except for a drive-up context or a drive-through context? I don't know. I mean, it's a good question.
We haven't come up with electric vehicle chargers too, sort of as a business model. They're trying to put a screen in there that has advertisements and make it free for vehicle charging, which we have not permitted right now because we've said it's a sign. So it's coming up in other items also.
So that would be prohibited except for where it's where there are exceptions, and we could make an exception for those in a filling device or a pump.
Well, so this, mean, this is an interesting observation. You said this came up with an electronic vehicle charging station? Because, I mean, for example, GM says their fleet's going to be electronic by 2035, right? So what if these gas station pumps, half of them switch to some kind of quick charge electric station and now they have to pull out their screens?
Yeah, but
Maybe I'm looking for a problem or solution in search of a problem, but.
you're probably going to need to update this code again before 2035.
Yeah, but so 2035 is the target, but that means that it's going to become more and more and more over the next 15 years. It's not like all of a sudden in 2035, the whole fleet's going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, the city is currently going after some grants to put these charging stations around town. It would be very nice if advertisement or whatever on it, because they will pay us.
So do we want to say, like, instead of gas station pump signs, say, vehicle fueling and charging island signs, or do we want to just expand the scope of this 20-18 a little bit to include those somehow, or?
Good idea.
Yeah, I would just say you all decide and we'll take it forward.
Yeah, I mean,
why wouldn't you just simply add that term and let it apply?
yeah,
Yeah, we could do that.
that would address the city's idea of trying to make some of their money back on it.
Right.
It's an open question as to whether gas stations will even be around at that point. If everybody has the ability to charge at their home and then in these charging stations and parking lots, are we going to need gas stations? But anyway, that's another story, another conversation.
They'll be charging plazas instead of gas stations. I mean, you still have to sit and charge your car for a while.
Yeah, there'll be something, but
Yeah, but most of your cars that you sit in have playtime built into them also. So remember that. So it's fun to charge your Tesla. They have their own inside stuff going on.
yeah.
29, we done with
Yeah, I think so.
charging pumps, address placards. So you're limited as, do we have anything today that limits the size of your numbers of your address?
I'm just going through here.
All right. Any comments on that? Okay, flags and flagpoles.
I do have one question on this one.
Oh, what?
Flag size, should that be square foot or what? I'm not sure I understand a
Yeah.
96-foot flag on a 60-foot pole.
Yeah, so you would say 24 square feet, right? Not feet.
So on a 60-foot pole, you can have a 96-square-foot flag. It's a big flag.
It has to be, we need to add a squared on the flag size max. It should be FT with a squared after it.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yep. Correct.
Yep. Good catch.
Yep.
All right. Anything more on flags and their poles? Okey doke. Electronic message centers
Well, it says we're talking about gas stations.
and manual changeable copy. So
Oh, I see what this is. This is so that you can change the price of gas, right?
Well, that is one. So your current code talks about an EMC or an electronic message sign as an actual sign type. It's not really a sign type, it's a component of a sign. And so we've created it as a component of a sign that's permitted for certain things. So one, obviously gas station signage, that's going to be permitted because you need to change the price of gas. Quasi and public and institutional uses, we heard from at least one of your local religious institutions that it's important for them to have an electronic message center on their sign to display events and happenings at that religious institution. And so we've added in electronic message center as a component to the quasi-public institutional use that can also include schools if they're not, it sounds like they're exempt, but it would be other institutional uses, museums or recreation centers or whatever. And then in the perimeter center overlay districts in accordance with the standards in the code. So there are standards around EMCs, and that has to do with where they're located, the dwell time, whether it transition sequences, how often it transition sequences, the fading or dissolving rather than scrolling or traveling. This all has to do with vehicular safety, essentially anything that could distract the driver. 8 seconds is a standard dwell time that's adopted by most DOTs, state DOTs. It could be anything though. It could be longer than that if you so choose, but that's sort of the standard. And then other things about how it works.
So let me ask a question. Would this allow for a flashing sign to
No.
occur? Which part does it say that?
Well, I think there's a section in here about flashing.
Which letter? Number 2?
C 21-C talks about message sequence, fade, dissolve, not scroll or travel.
So this does not cover the televisions at gas pumps.
No.
And then D talks about characterized by motion other than fading or dissolving.
Right.
So I think that is that you're flashing, Bob.
You think
C and D, I think, cover that you can't really flash.
I mean, by forcing fading or dissolving, that'll prevent flashing.
Yeah.
Flash is just a quick fade. Maybe we do want to put it in there.
Quick,
It fades
really
really
fast
fast.
fading.
Yeah, super fast.
Repeatedly.
It's gonna be 8 seconds. No, less than 8 seconds.
So any sign that flashes, blinks, oscillates would be prohibited. But maybe, yeah, since we're allowing for certain electronic messages, we should be specific down here as well. And just say, shall not scroll, travel, or flash.
Yeah, I mean, if you added that to the scroll and travel, that would perhaps help.
Yep. So this is a new set of regulations around these EMCs. Previously, they were prohibited, or currently they're prohibited, I should say. So this is, we're trying to set some parameters around these.
I know, for example, Perimeter Mall has wanted a sign like this. I mean, it had its neon bulb sign, which has been inoperable for quite a few years, but they want to be able to put up a EMC style sign at that location.
Yes, and a representative from Perimeter Mall was on the steering committee and obviously advocated for that.
Yeah, no, I think it's been desired for quite a few years.
That and the, like I said, the institutions, they're also big fans of having a component that's EMC.
Anything else on EMCs? All right, moving on. Sign lighting types.
This one is fun. Really fun because it's a little bit of matter of taste, but what we're trying to do is categorize the sign lighting types so that we can apply them to the different sign types in the different districts. And we currently have in the code a number of sign lighting that is types that are defined. Direct lighting and illumination is the definition. There's also halo lighting that's currently in there. But what we're trying to do is consolidate all that. Direct lighting essentially comes through the sign. It's going to be, whether it's a box with internal, well, there's internal box lighting, which is a whole separate one, but direct lighting is from within the sign. Shadow halo lighting is, as you see there, it's the dark lettering that's backlit essentially that creates the shadow effect. And then indirect lighting is either that, like we talked about, the ground flood directed at the sign, or the gooseneck lighting is shown that directs lighting, from outside of the sign to the sign. So those are the different sign lighting types. And then once we've defined those and explained them and showed pictures of them to help explain those, then we've just applied those to the different signs in the different districts.
Any questions on that? Okay. Sign standards, and then
here we go.
In each of these is where the defined types of signs are now regulated by districts.
Correct.
So, yes, beginning with this, obviously, it's a residential sign, which is typically, for many a subdivision, the entrance sign.
Correct. And so we defined what is a common development, and that is, what you would expect a big subdivision or some other sort of residential, multifamily development where there are multiple, buildings and lots and things like that. And that sign is indicating the entrance or the brand of that place. And so what we've done here in each of these, we've tried to create standards around the total sign count. How many of these can you have? Like, for example, the first one is a residential development monument sign. That's going to apply in your R, your single family, your residential attached, your residential multifamily, and in your new Dunwoody Village 3 district. And essentially, we're looking at those development signs out front of your development. So how many can you have? Well, 2 per common development entrance, each situated on either side of the primary vehicular entrance. Same with, in the RA, but in the RM and the DV3, where you might have a multifamily development, it's going to be 2 per common development entrance on either side of the primary vehicular entrance, and 1 sign per secondary vehicular entrance, but it has to be smaller. It has to indicate that it's a secondary entrance, so it can only be not greater than 40% of the allowable dimensions of the primary sign. Sign area maximum being 32 square feet. It's a little less than what you have now. Total sign height of 8 feet. And that's going to be above your average grade if that's how we define it. Sign face materials, wood carved and painted. We want these to be nice carved stone or metal with raised or applied vinyl letters, glass or synthetic materials that are crafted specifically to look like one of the above materials. Brick or natural stone sign base. Illumination can be either indirect, that would be by your flood, or a shadow halo lighting, which is a nice look, especially for a residential. It's a little, more subdued. What you don't want is the box, letter lighting, or you don't want necessarily a monument that glows from the inside through plastic sign face. And then it has to be a minimum of 5 feet from the right of way. And of course, it can't be within the vision triangle, so that takes care of that as well.
One formatting on the right of way setback there, you've got letter C on one page and the associated text on the following page. So I don't know if you want to tweak your table so that the two marry back together.
Right. I was wondering,
Yeah. Mine doesn't show that way, but I will look at that so that it doesn't print weird.
Yeah, on ours, it's the break between page 21 and page 22.
Ah, okay.
Might I also add a thought on that item B? I think, in the interest of making this usable, it probably is worth either referring to natural grade or pointing them toward 20-3-1 or 1A to avoid confusion. Sign height taken by itself could mean a very different thing without that natural grade piece of this. I think we might prevent some conflict by either saying 8-foot max subject to natural grade rules at 20-3 or whatever. Something to refer back to that.
Should we just refer to that in that front paragraph for Article 5? Just add a sentence to that paragraph? Because it's going to apply to all the rest of these in that article, correct?
Yeah, and again, I'm just thinking usability. When you grab the chart, it would be nice to be able to see 8-foot max subject from natural grade or whatever. And then you go look up natural grade.
Well,
I don't know, just a thought.
Or, I mean, but it depends, but it's defined in section 20-3, whatever it is, natural grade,
Yeah,
street right of way, because they're going to adjust it based on our conversation earlier.
right.
So you can't use one word. You may just refer to the section.
That sounds fine.
Okay. So I will note that there are probably many of the signs that are in the right of way.
That's what I was about to ask, Bob. Was that the right of way? I'm curious if that is in addition to what we've had in the past. Is that standard? Because
Well,
I'm
back in
thinking
the
there might
day,
be.
Here's how it used to work. When Tom Black was the Public Works Director for DeKalb County, and you wanted to put up a sign as a subdivision, you have to ask Tom, can we do that? And then John Goebbels, and they would look at it and say, yeah, I guess you can do it. And then you did it. I mean, that's really how it worked.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of neighborhoods within our city that have these, I think of Dunwoody Club Forest when it was a garden club. And at that point in time, they spent, I think it was $25,000 to have their neighborhood monuments built. And so my question is, have we studied this to see what neighborhood monuments would be impacted? Are existing neighborhood monuments grandfathered in to be able to continue to repair and exist?
Good example would be, I think they probably would be grandfathered in, but a good example would be, let's say, some errant driver smashes through one and tears it down, which, by the way, has happened.
It happened Dunwoody Club Forest. I was president of the neighborhood during that time.
Happened off the Dunwoody Road for one before you get to Kroger, more than one time. So what happens when it gets torn down and it's in the right of way?
20-29 says he can't rebuild depending on how severe it is. So we'll get there.
Usually the subdivisions will approach us and we have an agreement so that they have to apply to keep their sign there. We'll probably still do that. So if they have an existing sign, they'll just build it back if it gets torn down.
So would you want to say that in a section that talks about grandfathering, that would permit them to rebuild it or not?
No, we prefer them not to rebuild, but if they go through, for example, Jared and his wife actually approached us and got her neighborhood sign built in the right way. Went through all the proper channels and whatnot. We just don't want to encourage that.
Yeah, it's a unwritten exception.
Yeah, I mean, my only fear, Richard, is that as we add this in, you have the history before this was added in, but as the city turns over and some of these neighborhoods who've had these monuments erected for the last 30 years, you know, and they continue to keep them, they're not changing them, they're not knocking them down and starting from scratch, but they are repairing them. You know, or a car is running into them and requiring that one half of them be, you know, repaired, because I just worry about leaving it nebulous, when it's a significant financial impact for these neighborhoods. I mean, we're talking of probably 6 figures worth of work, of brick and stone monument work.
You'll find this for the you'll find the same issue with the commercial monument signs, where the new regulations are also more restrictive than what's out there currently, right? We have massive towering signs in some of the shopping centers. So you'll encounter the same issue there too. We've adjusted the non-conforming language so that these can remain, that panels can be exchanged, that the design can be updated, as long as we don't increase the non-conformity. So we looked at it from that perspective, that anything new that comes in has to be more modest in size, or has to meet these requirements, while still allowing for sort of design changes as, you know, as tastes develop over time.
I would think the issue probably comes up in the residential component, not the others. And then secondly, I would say that you would want to have the ability to apply whether it's at a safe location or not, right? Because it may have been, Tom may have had a bad day and allowed it when it really should never have been allowed from a safety perspective. And so I think you should still want to be able to do that. But having said that, then, as Paul just suggested, the sign could be replaced after review by the, you know, planning director in order to meet safety requirements and the design standards that are required today.
Well, I've got a solution to fix the language here, that I
Right.
think I've got a solution to fix the language in 2029 that precludes this. Right now, the last line currently reads a non-conforming sign. We're talking about what may be replaced, because this is the whole section on what happens to non-conformings. The very last line in there says, a non-conforming sign damaged or destroyed by an act of God or by other circumstances beyond the control of the owner, the driver running into their sign, may be repaired or replaced if the repairs do not exceed 50% of the total replacement cost. If we strike "if the repairs" to the end of the sentence,
But remember, this is applying to all commercial, O&I, everything.
but we're talking about damages by by an act of God or something beyond the control of the owner. Do we want the neighborhoods to be able to replace their signs?
Yeah, but this, I say yes to the neighborhood one, not to the others. This applies to everything.
So could we add just another sentence for
Well, I would-
whatever residential zoning categories we want to add? In the case of the following zoning categories, signs
You
may
could
be
put that
replaced.
there,
What's
I
that?
would assume, and incorporate the conversation we just had.
Okay.
And that would address Erica's concern about, Dunwoody Club Forest. I mean, and a whole lot of other places, by the way.
No, a whole bunch.
Yeah, I mean, they are definitely in the right of way. And they do get hit.
So carving that out to add residential areas an exception to that rebuild.
That rule.
Provided that they don't create, they're not causing safety hazards.
Okay.
I think we definitely need to keep that safety language in that you mentioned.
Yeah, good call.
Building wall sign, entrance wall sign.
All right, hang on a second. I'm still making notes. Exempt residential signs from the
You-
50%.
You don't want to be done with that yet.
Hang on. Okay. All right.
The thought about grandfathering for the residential is to allow it to be replaced after review for safety. And secondly, whatever it's replaced with, it could be the same thing if it meets the standards that are provided for in this. If it does not, it needs to meet those standards, which may mean a different design.
And, okay. So that's in the discretion of,
Well, I think if you're looking at safety component, I wouldn't use the term discretion
As determined by.
as determined, is hopefully going to apply some kind of criteria. It's unsafe because you don't have this sight distance, this visual, like what we did with the triangles.
right. Now, is that different than a commercial sign?
A commercial, I think we're saying if it is more than half
I-
destroyed.
My view of commercial is different than residential. If the commercial gets axed by God or by a driver, it should conform to the new thing. It'll have insurance to cover it. Right? So, look, it's that's the way it is. If we don't do that with the right-of-way stuff here, we're going to be, over time, putting a lot of neighborhoods into a bind.
Got it. Okay. Where did we leave off?
By the way, when those signs are put up, who knows who owns the darn things?
Well, good question. Hopefully it's a homeowners association or something.
Well, these are not associations.
Oh, it's just a
Just
developer put it up.
friendly neighbors coming together and putting signs up.
We were on 2022 C.
C, building entrance wall signs. These are not permitted on a single family residential or your townhome, but they would be permitted in a multifamily building, one per building entrance, 4 square feet maximum sign area, 6 feet high above the ground. And then your sign face materials, and it can be illuminated. And that's all that there is to that, really.
So the total sign height refers to the total above the ground.
Yeah. Yes, 6 feet max above the ground. We can put that in there if that helps. Above the ground to the, I'm trying to think if we would do the bottom of that sign or it would be the top of the sign.
Well,
Probably.
I think you probably would call it to the threshold of the door, if you want your starting place.
Okay.
Because
That's
it
a
could be
good
a
point.
threshold, and then it drops 2 feet.
Yep. That's a good point. I like that.
You're talking about the bottom of the sign or the top of the sign, right?
To the top of the sign. Yep. Right. Sign face materials. Oh, we've talked about illumination. Yeah. Okay. Anything on that?
All right.
Another fun section, limited duration signs. So this is where we're talking about the small yard sign, as we're categorizing it. And then the large yard sign. So we can't say what these are anymore. The large yard sign is essentially in the single family residential and like the residential attached townhome district. It can be your real estate sign. I mean, you can't say it, but that's what we're thinking. And the small yard sign is, what you would put out for political signs. We can't say that. So it makes it a little tricky to figure these things out. And people are using yard signs differently. You get these happy birthday, signs that have come up since COVID, where everybody's, you stick each individual letter in the ground, or it's a girl, and then you have all these emojis everywhere. Hopefully this takes care of some of that, but the other thing that might take care of that is that those companies rent those by the day, and so hopefully economics will help limit the duration. But so what we have generally here is we have small, large, and then we have the entrance wall banners for these districts. And these are limited duration, meaning they're not permanent affixed signs. So what we have for small yard signs would be a maximum of 2. Is that right? 2 maximum total signs. I don't think that's right. I need to go back and look at that. But we have a total allowance for the area of 30 square feet. Of 6 should be 5 signs. Total area per sign of 6 square feet max. The height can only be 3 feet max above average grade, I guess. Metal or wood supports, vinyl, plastic, metal, or wood face. No illumination. You can't light these things up, and it has to be at least 3 feet off the right of way. Now, it's a little different for residential multifamily or the DV3 district where you have multiple buildings. So we're allowing 1 sign per building, total of 5 per the property. Maybe a little light, but got to come up with some number there. 30 square foot max per the property. So it's similar. And that may be a little light too for a big apartment complex. So we need to figure that out. The large yard sign can be only on the street yard. That's the yard, closest to the, that faces the street. For residential attached, 6 square foot max on the sign area, height up to 6 feet. Can be on metal or wood supports. The sign can be vinyl, plastic, metal, or wood face. Not permitted to be illuminated. It has to be 5 feet back from the right of way because it's a bigger sign. In the residential multifamily or DV3, the location is within 100 feet of the primary vehicular entrance. 12 square foot max total sign area. Now that's because that's a larger development. You're probably going to get larger for lease, for rent, whatever kind of signs. And then you have the entrance wall banner. This is to one of the commissioner's points earlier. No freestanding banners are permitted that say, whatever. They can be affixed to the entrance wall only. On the main common development entrance, not on individual residences. Total sign area 30 square feet max. Can't be higher than the entrance wall because obviously it's affixed to the entrance wall, so you can't affix it so that it goes above the entrance wall. Freestanding materials. That's not right. That comes out. Freestanding with metal wood supports comes out. So it needs to be affixed to the wall. Not permitted to be illuminated. Obviously, it's set back the same as the entrance wall if it's affixed to it. And this one does have a duration for no longer than 4 months total each calendar year.
Can I ask a question about this one in regards to Brook Run Park, Richard? Richard, does this, at some points in the past, Brook Run Park has put up banner signs, whether it be for the farmers market or various events. Does this piece of the code impact that at all? Because those were not hung on an entrance wall.
I think those are special event banners, aren't they? No.
I mean, the farmer's market, would that be considered a special event considering it happens like every Saturday?
Technically, right now we're regulating them as temporary banners, but it is an issue that has come up before that people want to have more than can be done through temporary banners. So I've been talking to Brent Walker actually about how to work around that because he thinks that Brook Run Park should be sort of a special exemption for the temporary banners.
I agree. I think with that location and then also possibly even not just Brook Run Park, but if we go over to the Dunwoody Nature Center, when they do their monarchs and margaritas or their various, and that might be more temporary, but Brook Run Park definitely, I agree.
Yeah, I think he was
some
thinking
special
of like
consideration.
state-owned parks should have exemptions for that sort of thing. So I can pass that on.
Right, let me ask a couple questions. In small yard signs, you can have a total sign area per lot of 30 square feet. The area per sign cannot be more than 6 square feet and you can only have 2 of them.
Yeah, no, that's a mistake. I need to change it to 5.
All right, so you got math to fix there.
Yeah.
Secondly, when I look at the yard sign location above, I mean, yards, large yard sign, do we have a sign count maximum? Like we do with small signs? Or do we just leave it governed by the,
We do not.
because could I say I'm gonna have large signs, but I'm gonna cut them up into little teeny pieces? Should there be a max to this as well?
Yeah, we could do, say, 1 max sign count.
Because that was your intent, wasn't it, just to have 1 large sign?
Yeah.
Of that size, 6 square feet?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
I think that's a good point. That makes sense. 1 max. Okay. Do we? Let me just think about this a second. In the RM and the DV3, we could do 2 max there. With a larger application, plus you get 12 square feet. So you could do 2 6 square footers. Does that make sense for a larger multifamily? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You guys have anything more on this? All right. You want to move on to the next one, which is 2023 office districts.
So these are your O districts and your DV2, which is office. Here we would have a single panel monument sign, 1 maximum per frontage if you're on a corner lot, up to 2 total. So 1 on each side of the corner, or if you're not, just 1 you get. Up to 32 square feet if you're on a major frontage, which is defined, or 24 square feet maximum if you're on a minor frontage.
What's the difference between major and minor frontage?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm going to have to read the definition. Let's see here.
Is it defined?
Yes, should
Okay,
be.
good. Just checking.
And then, what are we on? I lost my place. 2023. Where are we? Oh, here we go. Okay, so total sign height here is 8 feet. Same thing on the sign materials as before. Same sign base. Not permitted to have electronic message centers generally in these zones. You're not permitted. Again, halo, shadow, or indirect lighting has to be 5 feet back from the minimum back from the right of way. In the DV2, which is the Dunwoody Village 2 zone, that's, I believe, a new zone that's been incorporated. These are not permitted at all for those uses. A single panel monument is not permitted, nor is a multi-panel monument. A multi-panel monument being 1 per common development. We're not going to allow multiple multi-panel developments. These tend to be larger developments. So at the main entrance, we're proposing to allow 1 per common development, up to 36 square feet. In certain of the zones, up to 42 in the OD zone, which is more intense, and the OCR 36 and 28, depending on if you're in a major or minor frontage. 8-foot maximum height, again, same stuff on the materials, illumination, and the setbacks. So that's monument signs. Generally, we care about the size of those, the location of those materials. That's, it's we want to make sure they're not too big, they're not blocking any views. They're lit in a way that's not distracting to the driver, and that they're scaled properly, et cetera. So that's generally the idea there, in their setback. All right, wall signs. This is a little more interesting because you have two different kinds of, I mean, you might have a building with one main entrance. Think of an office building that may have one main entrance, and all they need is a wall sign above the entrance. A smaller office building, say for example, not a high rise. There's one building mounted sign per building that would be permitted. 10% of the total width of the facade on which the sign is affixed. The sign itself can have a 4-foot maximum height. This is trying to scale to the building as much as possible. Now, if it's a building that has multiple tenant suites with exterior pedestrian entrances, like shown on the graphic, you could have one sign per tenant suite with an exterior pedestrian entrance and of a maximum width of 120% of the total pedestrian entrance door width with a 3-foot maximum height. And that shows you an example of that. These can be mounted on a raceway, painted directly on a wall. Everything has to be concealed, all the support and wiring components, of course, has to look nice. Indirect shadow halo again, so it has to be, you know, lit essentially by a gooseneck or by shadow or halo. It's not an internally lit box sign or anything like that. These are office uses, these aren't retail, so, you know, we can have less intense lighting. 9 feet minimum height, and that's going to be above, I guess we could call it above the threshold or the sidewalk. 16-foot maximum height, so we don't want it to be too high up on the building. But if there are upper floor tenant suites with exterior main pedestrian entrances, the lowest point of the sign shall not be higher than 1 foot above the highest point of the pedestrian entrance, so it can sit above the pedestrian entrance on the second floor if there is one. And they cannot protrude more than 12 inches from the wall in the OI, 24 inches from the other, from the wall from the other districts. So those are, there's a lot of, you know, different conditions we're trying to account for when it comes to office wall signs. So one size fits all just doesn't work.
No, that makes it really tricky. I want to ask a question about the 16-foot as an example, or rather the 16-foot maximum height. So taking, so small businesses make sense to me, but let's think of a Crate and Barrel as an example.
Mhm.
They tend to have, you know, large buildings, big glass fronts. And so I'm thinking the PCID area, is it possible that this might preclude some interesting and almost artistic signage for some of these buildings with that 16-foot height max?
This would only be for your office zones, not for those residential.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, retail.
Or not for the
retail.
retail. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
And this also does not pertain to like the high rises around the perimeter, in the perimeter district, which, you know, that's a separate, we'll talk about that in a little bit. State Farm and some of your other stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was about to bring up, State Farm, because I drove by that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's like really big. And really,
Yeah, like 400 feet up or something, 250 feet up, something like that. I measured all those signs as I was going through this to try to figure all that out, because that's tricky in there. And you've got some, I mean, Dunwoody is not an easy place to do a sign code, because you've got every kind of sign known to humanity, from the gas station sign to these high rises. You've got that Cox Communication sign on glass on top of it. I mean, there isn't a sign you don't have. So that's what makes it a fun code to work on, but not an easy one by any stretch, because we're trying to code for every single possible scenario. Some of it's suburban, some of it's urban, some of it's a mix. It's a lot of stuff going on. All right. The projecting or blade sign, this is, the one that's perpendicular to the wall, more and more popular type of sign. We've proposed one per building in the office context, or one building mounted sign per tenant suite if there's an exterior pedestrian entrance. 8 square feet maximum. Need a period after feet. 8-foot minimum height, the lowest point on the sign. That's just to make sure that you can wheel things underneath it and nobody's going to hit it. There aren't a lot of people over 8 feet, so that's probably not going to be a problem.
So could I have a wall sign and a projecting sign?
So you can pick.
It has to be one or the other, or can I do both?
You could do in this district one building mounted sign per building or per tenant space, or one ground mounted, and one ground mounted, I should say. So you cannot have 2 wall mounted or building mounted, different types of building mounted signs, I should say. You can have more than one building mounted sign if you have multiple tenants with their own pedestrian entrances, but you can't have a wall sign and a projecting sign. You can have a wall sign and a monument sign. Does that make sense?
Well, but where does it say I can't have the 2? If I have a store, if I have 5 tenant spaces with separate entrances, I could have 5 wall signs. I could have 5 projecting signs.
Correct.
You said I couldn't have both.
Correct.
Where does it tell me I can't have both?
It says up here, let's see here. Well, that's where multiple buildings are located. Let me see here. Okay, so it says that a property owner may choose from any 2 different permanent sign types listed below.
Page 24, top paragraph, kind of the intro paragraph.
Yeah, the intro paragraph. So well, we could say that the sign type would be ground mounted versus building mounted, but
if you're talking about 24, that limitation will have to choose one or the other. Hold on, we're multiple building. It's only talking about sign standards.
I'm looking at
Okay, for all of them.
Permanent sign types listed below.
Okay, for all of them. Okay, I got it. You good? Okay.
Okay.
And here's a question, Bob. Do we want to take like a 5-minute bio break since we've been at this for about 3 hours?
Are we losing an audience?
I know that that Thomas just stepped out, so.
All right. If that's what the people want, I'm for the people. So we're at 9:02. Come back at.
Yeah, just a chance in case somebody needs to duck off and get a drink of water.
Yeah. Okay. So
That'd
we'll
be
come
great.
back
Thank you.
like in about 5 minutes, but no later than 9:10. It is so much fun. We can only do this so often. Yeah, but I mean,